Okay, I hope you can all hear this. I'd like to call this meeting of the Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board to order. And I believe that the agenda stands as posted. And I don't believe we have any correspondence or announcements. I don't have any. Do we have any minutes we want to go over? Not yet? Okay. Well, our next meeting is November 19th, for those who are interested in putting it on their calendar so they don't miss it. We don't have any ZBA referrals tonight to fill the next 4 minutes until our first public hearing. Training workshop, yes. What we're trying to do is set up a training workshop on short-term rentals, Airbnbs, things of that sort. We have our new planning consultants have done quite a bit of work in that department. I know that our attorney has also done quite a bit of work with other communities, and we'll put this program together. The town of Rhinebeck has a task force that's actually working on this, and they're quite interested in working with us on putting this program together. So we hope to have something that we can work with. We know that the town of Rhinebeck needs to address this. We want to work with the village. We believe they're already working on an ordinance trying to address the situation. So that's something we're going to try and get into later, probably sometime in November, something like that. We'd like to do it this fall. But we'll be emailing everyone and letting everyone know when it is and where it is. It will hopefully be in this building. Yes, that is right. We're still picking up an email. And we still have 3.5 minutes. We should schedule these things like 6:35, give or take 5 minutes. And then we can sort of move it. Okay. Richard, do you have anything in the interim?
We can make it like 6:30, 6:31, 6:32.
I like that.
We don't stick to it anyway.
Yeah, you're right, we don't. Yeah. And just start when we're ready to go. That's a good idea, that's what we do. That's what we do. If I inquired of our attorney, how bad would it be to start in 3 minutes early? Okay, not what I was hoping to hear. Oh, I know what I can tell you. Apparently, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, we understand.
I'm only kidding. You should close your best practice.
Okay, we'll do that. My understanding is that the new secret regulations have been finalized, that the commissioner has signed off, and so I have a copy of them, which our planner has provided me with, and I'll have copies of them for all members of the plan. It appears that most of the changes are more or less cosmetic. There's no real significant changes. I'm looking at John.
I mean, I guess it depends on the type. The type 2 list has been changed. Some of those are good. But you can talk. It's probably something we should spend a little bit of time talking about.
Okay, so we'll try to get this
just
done.
take maybe 15 minutes at the end of the meeting.
Okay, I'll try to get this before our November 19th meeting, so you'll all have it. We will have 3 public hearings that night of some significance, so we'll be very busy with that. Talk really slow. That would be a very good idea to talk really, very slow.
Speed it up.
There you go.
How about those bets?
Yeah, what
Just
is
getting over the pain.
I'm sorry.
yeah, someone said Chris Sales in the hospital. Chris Sales, some stomach disorder or
Yes,
something,
yes.
is in the hospital.
He may be ready though. Still.
Yeah. Okay. I think the 2 minutes early be fatal. Yes,
3 minutes would have been fatal, but
We're good now.
2 minutes.
Is there, yeah, yes, well, I think that, well, Wayne is here representing Wayne, So why don't we just get started and we'll take our chances and hopefully don't get struck by lightning. Okay, Wayne, if you just want to come up and tell people what you want. Oh, Warren's going to do it for us.
Good evening, I'm Warren Smith, architect representing Wayne Baden. Wayne has property on the Wurtemberg Road that he wishes to subdivide. And according to the regulations for this zoning district, he may subdivide it, even though it's less than the, even though the remaining lots would be less than the required minimum, because the overall lot is larger than the minimum allowed to subdivide, if that makes any sense. So the intention is to subdivide the parcel with the existing residence here, with an attached accessory garage and barn, from a separate office. Barn was turned into office some years ago, and in the future, Wayne will want to turn it into a residence. When this office, when the barn was converted to an office, there was a septic system installed at that time, sufficient for a 3-bedroom residence. So it will not be necessary to make any changes to this because it will not be a 3-bedroom residence. The existing house has a septic system behind it. It doesn't show on the survey. The surveyor didn't have that information, but looking at the SES that was filed with the county, when the barn conversion was done to office, it locates the septic system for the house right out in here. So the intent of the subdivision is to split the difference between the two buildings. That's subject to a separate application to the zoning board for variance because the side setback requirement in this district is 50 feet, and we're slightly shy of that if we simply split it in the middle. But then coming down and incorporating, of course, the septic system for the barn office on its own parcel, and then creating the rest of the parcel, or retaining the rest of the parcel with the residents up here. This is 9G. There gets a lot of traffic. There's a bit of a hill here. These trees are planted as a screen and a buffer. And one of the reasons that this line makes a little proposed jog here is simply to give the person using the barn as a resident some control over this vegetated buffer from 9G, and then the house would retain control over the remaining buffer down there. But it's a question that only came up with the zoning board rather than the planning board, but that was the reason for the little jog in the subdivision line there, aside from keeping the buildings and their respective septic systems on 2 different parcels. So to say the board tonight will not be able to take any action until the zoning board considers the side yard setback variance and then makes a ruling on that at some future date, at which time then this board can consider resolutions to take action. But that is the gist of the application, a simple subdivision of an existing parcel into 2 parcels, each of which will have a residence with its own septic system.
If I could ask John just a question. I know in the past what we have done on some approvals is if a variance was required, we've been able to go forward with an approval if everything else was in order and make it a condition of actual stamping and signing of the final plat on granting of the variance. Could we do that tonight with this particular application?
Yes, you could. Let's circle back to that when, after you've heard comment on it. There probably isn't the ZBA meeting Wednesday night.
Yes.
And they're just having the public hearing, and the custom at the ZBA is to close the public hearing and issue the decision at the meeting following that.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
So that's the schedule. I think that if based on your hearing here, that if there is not a high level of concern about this on the part of the board or concerned members of the public, then you can pass a resolution subject to and then proceed in that fashion.
Okay. Thank you. I know that with all the noticing was correct and the sign was put up. Who did Eric and Richard, did you guys report on your visit to the site?
Yes, I think, for starters, it's turning from a commercial building into a residence, so I think that should be pleasing to anyone who lives remotely close by. It's a nice use of the property. We did have questions about the septic system, but I think you answered those accurately. We had no problem. I had no problem with it.
Yeah, I agree. This can be subdivided. I think done as well as it can be done. So I agree with Joe Richard.
Does the CAD have a report?
Hi, my name is Melanie Bates, and I'm the Conservation Advisory Board. I'll just read you a summary from one of our members. CAB member Robert Donaldson joined Eric Blum, and Richard Murray at this site visit. The CAB does not find any issues regarding the proposed subdivision and allowing for the accessory structure / office to be turned into a single-family residence. The proposed subdivision will neither have any negative effect on the existing rural and natural and historic character of the existing buildings and land area, nor will it affect the integrity and beauty of the community located along Rhinebeck Road. According to the site map, the property line located along the western portion of the property has a section of trees. The subdivision line goes around the line of trees, allowing for the trees to remain undisturbed. The CAB supports this act of preserving natural tree screening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the planning board? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay. This was classified as a type 2 action under seeker, so could I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
John, is there anything else you wish to say before I read a approval resolution?
No, just to make sure that you incorporate a provision that says that if there are any conditions imposed on the variance by the zoning board of appeals and granting the variance, that those should be incorporated as by reference as conditions in the your approval.
Okay. That will be condition number 4 on the resolution. Let me read this. Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts as follows on the application by Wayne Dagan to the Planning Board for subdivision plat approval under Town Code Chapter 101, subdivision of land, in the matter of a proposed 2-lot minor subdivision at 145 Wittenberg Road in the rural countryside RC5 zoning district. Approves the application for the Dagan minor 2-lot subdivision and authorizes the chair to stamp and sign the subdivision plat upon applicant's satisfaction for each of the below conditions and the requirements within 180 calendar days of the adoption of this resolution. Stamping of the subdivision plat as a non-jurisdictional subdivision for filing purposes only by the Dutchess County Health Department. Submission of final plat drawings in required form and number, except as may be modified and numbered by the chair, and bearing all required stamp, seals, certificates, and notes. As this action will create a new lot or potential building site, the applicant must meet the provisions of the town land subdivision regulations, requiring either the set-aside of recreation land or cash in lieu of land payment to the town's recreation fund, as well as those provisions of the town's zoning code that pertain to requirements of the town's affordable housing regulation, and subject to a variance application to the zoning board of appeals, and if the variance is granted with this approval, well, then it's a conditional approval at this point. Any conditions the ZBA places upon that variance will also have to be conditions applicable to this approval resolution. And payment of any outstanding fees and the reimbursable amounts due to the town of Rhinebeck incurred during the review and processing of this application. The applicant is also advised of the requirement that within 60 calendar days of stamping by the chair, the final plat must be filed with the Dutchess County Clerk's Office. Could I hear a motion to approve? A second. Any discussion? I'll poll the board. Eric?
Aye.
Sharon? Melody? Richard? Woody? And I vote aye. So if the ZBA says yes, you're good to go. And if there are any conditions they place on the variance they give, then they will also be applicable to this agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to mention earlier that Edna is not with us tonight. She's out of town, is not able to join us.
So Michael, to make this easier in the future, Kim and I will put together some language that will send the direction that can be incorporated. You probably shouldn't sign the plat until after the ZBA.
No, well, I wouldn't because it's the approval's tonight, but I wouldn't sign it. Right, the condition's not met, so I wouldn't. Okay, the next public hearing is Edward McNally, 379 Slate Quarry Road, minor subdivision, lot line adjustment. And
So we are trying to purchase 32 acres from our neighbor, 32 acres of undeveloped land that's adjacent to our property, and the neighbor is the Slavic Church. And so we're applying for a lot line subdivision.
Okay, you don't have a map to show to the public? Or? Okay, well, who did the site visit for us? Well, it was a site visit, and I'm assuming you did the site visit for McNally?
Did you do one?
Somebody was assigned.
Yeah.
Must have been Ed.
Actually, Heather did two others, and she gave me her comments, so I have her comments.
Michael and Ellen.
Okay.
We just sit down.
All right, well, I'm going home now.
So, but what are we concerned about? This is a
We're
consolidation.
not concerned about anything. I have been up to the property previously through other applications. Basically, what they're doing is they're subdividing out a portion of the large parcel of land that the Northern Duchess Bible Church, I think, got from the Stewart family. And they're then consolidating that with their existing farm, and it will be continued to be an agricultural production. It's not for new home or anything like that. It's not for a new building site. So,
Could you give it an acreage of both parcels?
Our original parcel was 6.5, but then maybe 2 years ago, we finalized a purchase of 11.8 acres from the Duchess Bible Church, also contiguous. So we're now buying 32 more.
Okay, so you're going from 11 plus 6 is 17?
We're almost at 8, I think we're at 18 right now, and so we're trying to get.
And you're getting another 30. And the parcel that from the Bible Church is how large?
We're buying 32 acres out, I think what's left over is like 75,
Okay.
so.
it's a very large piece
So
of land.
we're talking significant parcel of land, nothing is all being pieced up here and it's going.
We're just carving out another.
This is 75 remaining acres, does that have any structures on it? So it's all undeveloped.
It's all undeveloped, it's all like paths through the woods, it's
Right.
pretty wonderful.
So the Stewarts had an incredible network of trails and everything through that when they owned it. And I guess those trails still exist. So. Since site visit didn't come off, did the CAB by any chance manage to get up there?
No, that, due to the scheduling challenges, that did not happen.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, with the scheduling changes, we forgot to schedule it. So it's,
That's a big challenge.
that's a general of it. Any questions by members of the planning board? Any questions, issues, members of the public for the applicant? Okay, hearing none. We have classified this as unlisted under seeker, so I have a seeker resolution. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts with an uncoordinated environmental quality review as follows in the matter of the McNally Northern Duchess Bible Church subdivision lot consolidation application dated February 10th, 2018. 1, determines upon review of the EAF Part 1 certified by the applicant and its own completion of EAF Part 2 in consideration of both the criteria for determining significance set forth in Title 6, Part 617.7 NYCRR, the proposed action as described in the application and being an unlisted action will cause no potential significant adverse impact on the environment unless this is a negative declaration, determination of non-significance, being an environmental impact statement is not required. 2, authorizes the chair to so execute the first page of the EAF and directs the planning board clerk to distribute and file without requirement for publication. The EAF and negative declaration annotation in the matter set forth within the secret implementing regulations at 6 Part 617.12 NYCRR. Could I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Could I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And I have a resolution here. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts as follows on the application by Edward McNally, Monique Martin, and the Northern Duchess Bible Church for approval of a minor 2-lot subdivision lot consolidation on Slate Quarry Road under Town Code Chapter 101, subdivision of land within the rural countryside RC5 zoning district. All is depicted within the application and minor 2-lot subdivision lot consolidation plan prepared by John Decker, LS, and dated February 10th, 2018. Approves the application for the McNally minor 2-lot subdivision and authorizes the chair to stamp and sign the subdivision plat upon the applicant's satisfaction of each of the below conditions and the requirements of the 180 calendar days of adoption of the resolution. 1, stamping of the subdivision plat as non-jurisdictional subdivision for filing purposes only by the Dutchess County Department of Health. Submission of final plat drawings in required form and number, except as may be modified to the number by the chair and bearing all required stamps, seals, certificates, and notes. Submission of the consolidation deed for the McNally parcel to be filed with the Dutchess County Clerk's Office. And payment of any outstanding fees and or reimbursable amounts due to the town of Rhinebeck incurred in the review and processing of this application. In that no new lots or building sites are being created, the planning board deems not applicable to this application, either those provisions of the town land subdivision regulations requiring the set aside of recreational land or cash in lieu of land paid to the town's recreation fund, or those provisions of the town zoning code related to affordable housing. The applicant is also advised of the requirement that within 60 calendar days of stamping by the chair, the approved final plat must be filed with the Dutchess County Clerk's Office. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call the board. Eric.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Melody. Richard.
Aye.
Woody.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So once you get the final plat from me and all, and so I can stamp and sign, you're ready to file with the county clerk's office.
Thank you.
You're very
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
All right. Next public hearing. All right. This is the Philip Williams representing Ronald Zeitz. And here is going to be presented.
Good evening. Since the last time we met, we had the property surveyed, and we also had the site visit by Woody and Edna, I believe. And I also submitted everything to Gretchen that was required, that she required in an email. And now we're just here for the public hearing.
Okay. Can you hear me, Woody?
Ed and I went out with a member of the Conservation Board, and I saw no planning board concerns.
And Edna's comments are the same. She saw no issues with this. No problem. The CAB, do they have a report?
Just a comment from Rachel Hyman, who was there. She said that there were no issues.
Okay, thank you. Any questions by members of the board? And any questions from the public on this? Okay, I think this was also classified as unlisted, so I have a secret resolution to read. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts with an uncoordinated environmental quality review as follows on the matter of the Ronald Zeitz minor 2-lot subdivision application to create a building lot at 228 Stone Church Road. 1, determines upon review of the EAF Part 1 certified by the applicant and upon completion of EAF Part 2, consideration of the criteria for determining significance set forth in Title 6, Part 617.7C NYCRR. The proposed action is described in the application and being unlisted action will cause no potential significant adverse impact on the environment unless there is a negative declaration determination of non-significance, being an environmental impact statement is not required. 2, authorizes the chair to so execute the first page of the EAF and directs the planning board clerk to distribute and file without requiring publication the EAF and negative declaration annotation in the manner set forth in the secret implementing regulations, Title 6, Part 617.12 NYCRR. Could I hear a motion to approve? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Could I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts as follows on the application by Philip Williams representing Ronald Zeitz for approval of a minor 2-lot subdivision under Town Code Chapter 101 Subdivision of Land, Section 101-4.4 of 228 Stone Church Road in the Rural Countryside Zoning District. Approves the application for the Zeitz minor 2-lot subdivision and authorizes the chair to stamp and sign the subdivision plat on the applicant's satisfaction of each of the below conditions and the requirements within 180 calendar days of the adoption of this resolution. 1, stamping of the subdivision plat as a non-jurisdictional subdivision for filing purposes only by the Dutchess County Department of Health. Submission of final plat drawings in the required form and number except as may be modified number by the chair and bearing all required stamps, seals, certificates, and notes. As this action will create a new lot or potential building site, the applicant must meet the provisions of the town land subdivision regulations requiring either the set-aside of recreation land or cash in lieu of land payment to the town's recreation fund, payment of any outstanding fees and/or reimbursable amounts due to the town of Rhinebeck incurred during the review and processing of this application. And the applicant is also advised of the requirement that within 60 calendar days of stamping by the chair, the approved final plat must be filed with the Dutchess County Clerk's office. Is there a motion to approve? Second. For the poll of the board, Richard.
Aye.
Woody.
Aye.
Paris.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Melody. And I vote aye.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay.
Well, we're on schedule.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Okay. Well, actually, what you're going to do is that the final? But you also need, after you're done, you also need a now. Okay. You have very good, thank you. Okay, our next public hearing is Charles Kelso, 16 Enterprise Road, wetland permit and site plan review and approval. This is to build a 760 square foot addition to a single family residence at 16 Enterprise Road. Take it away.
So I'll just reintroduce the project for anyone who's here who has not heard of it. We are proposing a 760 square foot addition on an existing house, and we're within 100 feet of a body of water, but there is no interconnection of the runoff or anything because there's a large natural berm, just a raised area of land separating the house from the pond. That's really the gist of it. No increase in number of bedrooms, staying the same.
And I know Edna and who else?
Yeah, we went out there and just as said, there's not only the berm, it's a rock ledge basically that comes between the house and the pond. And so there's no real connection between the two. The driveway is between the roads. I didn't see any problems with it.
And thanks to our clerk, I have Edna's comments right here. Mr. Kelso is planning an addition on the north side of his house that is almost as large as the existing house and will be almost entirely within the 100-foot buffer of the existing home. The addition will have a full basement, so excavation will be required. The excavated soil will be used on site near the house. The site for the addition is on level ground and is separated from the pond by an existing long, narrow, rocky hill on which there are mature cedar trees. The pond drains into a sizable wetland on its south with a buffer that is outside the building site. Given existing site conditions, construction of the addition should not threaten the pond or nearby wetland. The site plan states that an existing two-bedroom septic system will be used. The application materials do not include a floor plan that shows the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, so the planning board should ensure that the septic system will be adequate to accommodate the addition. And your response to that is?
The not having a floor plan?
Well, no,
Yes.
it's going to be
There shall be no.
two-bedroom, no
Yes.
additional bedroom? CAB.
So I'll just read a report. On Friday, September 28th, 2018, CAB member Corinna Borden met with the owner and conducted a site plan review on the site. Though it is unfortunate the proposed addition will encroach on the 100-foot buffer, that does seem like the best placement for the addition. The CAB urges the contractor to install a silt fence and protect construction runoff to the pond to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the board? Any questions or comments from the public on this? Okay, I believe this was a type 2, therefore we don't have to worry about secret. We can get a resolution to close the public hearing. Second? All in favor? I will read. Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts as follows on the application by Charles Kelso for site plan review and approval under Town Code Chapter 125 zoning and wetland permit under Town Code Chapter 120 to authorize the construction of a 760 square foot addition to a single family residence at 16 Enterprise Road in the rural countryside district, all is depicted or described in the site plan and elevations prepared by Jordan Valdina, AIA. With respect to the application for wetland permit, based upon review of submitted information, including reports from planning board and members of the CAB on their site visit to the project property, finds the proposed work is consistent with the objectives stated in Chapter 120, Wetlands, Section 120-2 and 180-3. 120-. B, grants the requested wetland permit conditional upon receipt of site plan approval by the planning board. With respect to the application for site plan approval, approves the application inclusive of the site plan and elevations prepared by Jordan Valdina, AIA, authorizes the planning board chair to stamp and sign the above-cited site plan upon the applicant's satisfaction of the below conditions and the requirements within 6 calendar months of the adoption of this resolution. 1. Submission of the above-cited site plan in the form and number specified within Town Code, Chapter 125, Section 125-78B, except as it may be modified to a lesser number by the chair in consideration of filing and distribution requirements, and including thereon all required stamps, seals, and certifications. Payment of any outstanding fees and reimbursable amounts due to Town of Rhinebeck related to review and processing of the applications subject to this resolution. In taking this action, the planning board further authorizes the town zoning enforcement officer, zoning administrator, and the building inspector, following receipt of the above-cited site plan stamped and signed by the chair, to issue first a building permit and subsequently a certificate of occupancy or use for the proposed addition and related site improvements upon their determination that both the terms of this resolution and all applicable codes, laws, rules, regulations, including but not limited to the provision of the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code and the review of the ZEO, ZA, and/or building inspector have been satisfied. Could I have a motion to approve? Second. We'll poll the board. Eric? Aye. Sharon? Aye. Richard? Aye. Woody?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay, our next is Lotus Engineering. This is to install a ground-mounted solar array at 20 Haggerty Hill Road.
Hello, for those of you who don't know, my name is Kyle Montag, project manager for Lotus Solar at Hudson, New York. We're representing Gary and Edna Lockman at 20 Haggerty Hill Road. What we are proposing here is to install a dual-axis 8.6 kilowatt residential tracking system. Now what we're going to be doing is filing a couple of variances here. One is for height variance, go from 15 feet to 20 feet. The other variance is to allow it in the front yard of the property facing the road. What I brought with me is just a picture of a tracker that was installed in another residence home, just for reference, to get an idea of what it looks like. I did provide a 3D or just a Photoshop image of the property where we'll be installing this as well. It's a little hard to see, but what we've got here is a long driveway, about 260 acres, and it's very well screened with thick forest. So this is where we're going to be over here in this land clearing. We're proposing that we don't chop down any trees. We just want to be as less invasive as possible, which is why we chose this spot. I did bring a couple of older pamphlets. If the board wants to take a look at some other pictures of these, just kind of have another idea of what they look like. I'll pass that to you guys. You can take a look.
That's a picture of the actual
That is-
setup that will go in place?
Exactly.
Just one unit,
One unit.
and it's just tracked, so it's moving.
Yes.
And what are the dimensions of that?
This tracker is 20 by 20, about a little over 400 square feet. It's actually got a pretty small footprint for the size of the system. We've just got one single pole mount mounted in the center.
Okay, who did the site visit? Eric and Sharon?
Sure. Yeah, I see the reason for for it being square. It's best arrangement for that panel that tracks completely. They have the highest capacity panels, so they have fewer of them necessary. The amount that they're putting out, the single pole, it's very obtrusive on the spot, and the spot is incredibly unobtrusive to the rest of the surrounding area. Nobody can see it from anywhere. So I see absolutely no problem with this. They have it not sort of out of their viewpoint from in front of the house, so it's not even obstructive to them. So it looks like a nice setup.
Sharon?
Yes, I agree. It takes up such a small area, such a large property, that it was really tiny. The only comment I have, I mean, it's a great location, it's a great setup. They can lower it if there's going to be a storm, whatever. The only thing I have to comment is when I left the site and I went up Haggerty Hill, I just happened to look off to my left, and I could see your car.
Is that right?
I could see his car sitting down there, but that was a little white car, it was very bright, whereas this is dark and it's been moving and nothing to see it.
Did CAB have a report?
No, not at this time, because they're currently setting up a site visit.
Okay, thank you. Members of the planning board, any questions?
I just have an interesting question. Is the motion that it moves, is that driven by battery in case power fails?
This is connected to the utility, so if the utility goes down, it will shut
It
down.
shuts down.
However, he is thinking about doing batteries. He also has a backup generator. If he does do a battery system, this will operate normally. If it is down.
Other questions? Members of the public, questions or comments? Okay, we have this as a unclassified, unlisted under seeker, so I have a seeker resolution. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board directs with an uncoordinated environmental quality review as follows in the matter of Lotus Energy Blackwood application to install a ground-mounted solar array at 20 Haggerty Hill Road. Well, you've heard it all before, EF Part 1, EF Part 2, and we will be so authorizing the chair to so execute the first page of the EF and direct the planning board clerk to distribute and file without requirement for publication the EF and negative declaration annotation in the manner set forth in the seeker implementing regulations, Title 6, Part 617.12 NYCRR. Could I hear a motion to approve?
So
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Approval resolution. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts on applications by Lotus Engineering for site plan review and special use permit approval under Town Code Chapter 125 zoning, sections 12547-.B.3 and 12547F to authorize the installation of a ground-mounted solar array at 20 Haggerty Hill Road in the rural countryside RC5 zoning district and multi-resource district. All is depicted or described in the applications, site and setback maps, topography map, and product information and technical specifications provided by Lotus Energy. Reaffirms its prior classification of the proposed action as unlisted under seeker, for which a short environmental assessment form was completed. With respect to both applications, planning board approval is contingent upon approvals by the Town of Rhinebeck Zoning Board of Appeals for relief from section 12547F4 to permit the solar array to be situated between the fronting street and the principal structure on the site, and a variance to permit the solar array to extend beyond the permitted 12 feet in height to an installed maximum of 20 feet. Case 971 is scheduled for a hearing on Wednesday, October 17, 2018, at the Town Hall, 80 Market Street, Rhinebeck, New York. With respect to the application for site plan approval, approves the application upon the site and setback maps and topography map and product information and technical specifications provided by Lotus Energy. Authorizes the planning board chair to stamp and sign the above-cited maps and technical specifications upon the applicant's satisfaction of all conditions and or requirements within 6 calendar months of adoption of this resolution. And these terms also refer to the special use permit 12547. Approves the applications inclusive of the site and setback maps, topography map, and product information and technical specifications provided by Lotus Energy. Authorizes the planning board chair to stamp and sign the above cited maps and technical specifications upon the applicant's satisfaction of below conditions and the requirements within 6 calendar months of the adoption of this resolution. Approvals by the Town of Rhinebeck Zoning Board of Appeals, case 971, for relief from section 125-47F and a variance to permit the solar array to extend beyond the permitted 12 feet in height to an installed maximum of 20 feet. Payment of any outstanding fees and or reimbursable amounts due the Town of Rhinebeck related to the review and processing of the applications subject of this resolution. In taking this action, the planning board further authorizes the zoning enforcement officer and/or building inspector, following receipt of the above cited maps and technical specifications, stamped and signed by the chair, to issue a building permit upon determination of both the terms of this resolution and all other applicable codes, laws, rules, or regulations, including but not limited to the revisions of the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code, when the review of the CEO and/or the building inspector have been satisfied. And I will add that we will also be adding the language that Judge Williams gave us earlier, that any conditions specified by the ZBA in granting the two variances, given that those two variances are granted, will also become applicable to this resolution and also be necessary to be followed as well. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve? Second. I'll poll the board. Richard?
Aye.
Woody?
Aye.
Eric? Aye. Sharon? Aye. Melody? And I vote aye.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Michael, I just want to say that I've spoken to Scott Bergen and the members of the CDA, and they are amenable to changing the day that they meet. Probably would work out best to start in 2019.
Yes. Why don't we sit down together and work out our schedules for the ZBA and the planning board at that time and see if we can coordinate.
Okay, I just wanted to close the circle, let you know.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay. Our next one is Christine and Robert Stevenson, 24 Wellman Lane. This is another minor subdivision, lot line adjustment. Take it away.
Hope you can all see that. My name is Sean Idle. I'm here speaking for Christine and Robert Stevenson, who are here tonight. Recap of last meeting, application is for a lot line adjustment, transferring 3.634 acres from a currently vacant parcel that's currently 9.931 acres, moving that acreage to their farm property, Wellman Farm, which is currently 19.833 acres. So it reduces the vacant parcel to 6.297, increases the farm parcel to 23.467.
I actually know who did the site visit for this one. Melanie and I actually did this one. Melanie?
It's a beautiful piece of land back there, and really very desirable building lot. Don't even see any issues with it. It's very flat. It's very protected in terms visually. I don't see anything from the road. I don't see any problems. It makes perfect sense.
I concur with what Melody has to say. We didn't see any reason why this couldn't be a perfectly straightforward subdivision lot consolidation. CAD.
This is from Florida Borden. The CAB foresees no environmental impact.
Can you come up with,
Sure.
I want to get this on tape for posterity.
So this comes from Corinna Borden from the CAB. The CAB foresees no environmental impact from this application.
Okay, thank you. Any questions by members of the planning board?
Yes, you said this will make a nice building lot. This is going to be a pad.
Well, basically, there's two lots involved here, the one on Daisy Lane, and then the air farm. What they're doing is cutting about how many acres off of the Daisy Lane lot? 3 acres, and they're consolidating that with Wellman Farm. That will leave the other one 6-point-something acres as an improved building lot.
Okay.
As a lot of record.
Now, just because I wasn't aware of the 6-acre, the ability to subdivide. Does this fall in the same category? So that 6 acres could be cut into
In this case, it.
down the road?
It's,
Well, it's already being subdivided this time.
it's down,
But-
no, I see what you're saying.
It creates a legal 6.29 acre.
I would say-
lot. It could be split.
Probably a ZEO determinant, but I would say my opinion would be no, because it says you're allowed one subdivision of a lot.
Right.
And since you're subdividing it down to that now, it doesn't pre-exist as that, then I don't believe that particular term would apply, because
When
it's,
someone subdivides a lot, they're never allowed to subdivide it again?
well, they have to get variances from the ZBA, since it would be too small. They wouldn't be able to meet the 5 acre requirement for the 2 lots. I think you're referring to is that section of the zoning law, that if, prior to 2009, this is all in the 3 acre zone. And as long as you own 6+ acres in that zone, you were allowed to subdivide it into 2 lots of 3 acres or more on a one-time deal. I believe in this case, since this is being subdivided now in 2018, they're creating that situation. So therefore, that opportunity to subdivide that lot, the newly created lot of Daisy Lane, would not apply.
So if I buy that 6.29 acre lot, I wouldn't be allowed to?
I believe you'd have to go through the ZBA to get variances to allow you to do smaller. I just don't think that one provision they put in there when they upzoned would apply, because you're creating a situation now, 9, 10 years after the law went into
Okay.
effect. But that's a ZEO determination and possibly a legal determination as well. That's just my opinion.
Not to muddy the waters, but had they decided to subdivide this into 2 parcels, instead of putting part onto the existing farm, they just subdivided what was there instead.
I think the problem they would have is it's a flag lot, the one they're subdividing,
Okay, so it's
and
not-
therefore I don't think you wouldn't have the access, you wouldn't have the road frontage, so I don't think you
Again,
could.
share access.
I think you need a minimum 40 feet access for the lot that you'd be creating, and that doesn't exist. The flag is just big enough now for the existing Daisy Lane.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments from the public? Questions? Okay, this was also an unlisted action, so you know what the secret resolution is? Can I just ask for a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
Could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Okay, I will read this. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts as an application by Christine and Robert Stevenson for approval of a minor lot subdivision, lot consolidation under Town Code Chapter 101, subdivision of land at 24 Weldon Road and Daisy Lane in the rural countryside zoning district, Ag District 20, all as depicted or described in the application and site plan prepared by Andrew Schofield, LS, and dated 9/11/18. Reaffirms its prior classification of proposed action as an unlisted action under seeker, for which a short environmental assessment form was completed, confirms receipt of an agricultural data statement as required by site location within or less than 500 feet from the certified ag district. With respect to the minor subdivision lot line adjustment, approves the application inclusive of the site plan prepared by Andrew Schofield, LS, and dated September 11th, 2018. Authorizes the planning board chair to stamp and sign the above cited plan upon the applicant's satisfaction of the below conditions and requirements within 6 calendar months of the adoption of this resolution. Stamping of the subdivision final plat is non-jurisdictional subdivision or for filing purposes only by the Dutchess County Health Department. Submission of final plat drawings in required form and number except as may be modified and numbered by the chair and bearing all required stamps, seals, certificates, and notes. Submission of a consolidation deed for the property at 24 Wellman Lane to be filed with the Dutchess County Clerk's Office. Payment of any outstanding fees and the reimbursable amounts due to the Town of Rhinebeck related to the review and processing of the application subject to this resolution. In that no new lots or building sites are being created, the planning board deems not applicable to this application either those provisions of the town land subdivision regulations requiring the set aside of recreational land or cash in lieu of land payment to the town's recreation fund, or those provisions of the town zoning code related to affordable housing. The applicant is also advised of the requirement that within 60 calendar days of stamping by the chair, the approved final plat must be filed with the Dutchess County Clerk's Office. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I will pull the board. Richard?
Aye.
Woody?
Aye. Eric.
Aye.
Karen. Aye. Nellie.
And I vote aye. Just so everyone understands, one reason we were putting this, advising the applicant of the requirement to file with the Dutchess County Clerk's Office, we had 2 people this year who did subdivisions, it was approved, they failed to file it with the clerk's office, and therefore the subdivision approval expires, and they have to go through the whole process again, so that's why we're trying to make sure that you know that you gotta get it down there once it's stamped and signed. Okay.
Thank you all.
Those were our public hearings. So we have now 2 presentations of new applications. KPH2, this is the, it says play yard, but this is the play yard installation of a rooftop bulkhead and deck, and entry building and parking court, play along the stairs, swimming pool, with deck lawn, electrical shed, generator, and underground utilities. I'm not sure.
Just thought it was a school in the base.
No, I never thought of that.
Where's the color one from?
Good evening, Mark Levinsky, here representing KPH2 Management, along with project architect Sam White and project landscape architect Howard Williams. KPH2 is proposing, as Michael just read, some improvements on the property that were, I'll always go back to the original master plan that we have worked through with the board back in early 2017. So these specific items and components that are being proposed, improvements being proposed, were also part of the master plan that the board had previously approved. So in front of you tonight are the following improvements. One is a bulkhead with a roof deck, so it's essentially access to the roof with a deck on top of the roof of the residence. Entry garden with a parking court. And so, for example, the bulkhead with the roof deck, Sam will have some, continued discussion about that. Entry garden with a parking court, Howard will have some discussion about that. Play lawn with the stairs, also Howard will continue some discussion. I'll give an overview of everything. A pool with a deck and lawn will be also Howard. Electrical shed with generator enclosure, that'll be Sam. And then underground utilities, that's me. Everything I do is underground. As I said before, this was approved as part of the master plan, and so now detailed plans are being submitted to this board for consideration. And the specific application is for site plan and special permit. It's just, and the special, the site plan application is, for the, building and also the improvements associated with it. The special permit in this particular application is for construction within 1,000 feet of the high water mark of the Hudson River. Major excavation, so that's excavation greater than 200 cubic yards. And then also special permit application. It's kind of interesting. I had this. I had a discussion earlier with a board on a pre-app meeting this evening. Is for a number of accessory structures on this property. Since it's in the HP 20 zoning district, when a number of accessory structures exceed the allowable 3, because of the size of the property in that zone, and this is 50 acres in size, there's a formula that allows for the aggregate area of those accessory structures for approval by special permit by this board, and also the number of accessory structures. So that is also part of the application, along with I've submitted the long form EAF that was previously approved for part of the master plan, ag data statement, coastal assessment form, and the other requirements as part of site plan. The overall, this is a and I provided just a reduced version of the overall site plan. Site still is as we've has always presented. Access, excuse me, off the River Road. These improvements that are being proposed are located in this area here. And so, starting, just in order, and if you take a look on the site plans, the roof deck is shown in this particular quadrant of the residence. The entry garden, so the access into the residence is still via the driveway coming in through here, and then the improvements to the parking area and the entry garden is shown in this, and Howard has some more detail related to that. Play along with the stairs, it's actually both Howard and Sam that will be able to talk about that. That's located, I guess, would be in the southwesterly portion of the property. So there's an existing lawn there, and then there are some proposed improvements there. The electrical shed with a generator enclosure, it's removal of there's one structure there now. It's going to be removed and replaced with a shed that will handle the electrical equipment along with the generator. And then underground utilities, that's just essentially a blanket for the connection of all these, all the utilities, connection to the improvements through here, through the utilities, and also in connection with the previous approval that this board granted for I think I still showed it on here, it's not as bold as it was before, but the underground utility that was going to provide three-phase power to the residents. And I think I just skipped the pool, and the pool deck and lawn is also located in this area here. Before I turn it over to Sam and Howard, I just wanted to review the one, it's just a discussion that we had, it was with Melody, Michael, and with Jim earlier, regarding the accessory structures. So my count on the accessory structures here, I've listed it in my transmittal letter, would be, I count the powerhouse as an accessory structure, the electrical shed is also, for electrical, and the generator enclosure, and also I list the pool as an accessory structure, and I know we had a discussion about that. And, could you?
It's not a roof accessory structure.
It's not roof, but I thought it counted towards accessory structure.
I believe it's roof structures, only roofed accessory structures.
That's different from what I understand. It's only metal accessory structure in that pool. Not that I don't agree with that.
So I know this was, I don't want to.
No, don't keep talking enough.
I don't want to tie up the meeting, but
No,
just,
don't keep going.
it would just be depending, because it went through. The CEO originally reviewed it for that, for this addition to the accessory, to the special permit requirement, or requesting a special permit for that. So I just, maybe just a minor modification to the application that would eliminate that one special permit for accessory structures.
Okay, if I could, not more than 3 roofed or otherwise enclosed accessory structures other than agricultural buildings, and those structures less than 50 square feet in area or structure footprint, of which not more than 1 accessory structure shall be a private garage detached from the dwelling, shall be permitted on an individual lot of residential district. In the event the lot exceeds 10 acres, additional accessory structures may be cited, especially if it's granted. So it's 3 roofed or totally enclosed, and a pool, which are not,
It's not going to be roofed.
You already have an indoor pool.
So then it's not, so it doesn't count as an accessory
Not under,
structure.
it counts as an accessory structure, you have to get a permit for it.
Right.
For just being a pool, but not as a count of the 3 roofed accessory structures requiring a permit, then to have more roofed accessory structures than 3.
Okay, well then,
Does that make sense?
Just say yes.
Yes.
taking that as a no. The limit on roofed accessory structures is 3. Okay? If you want more than 3 roofed accessory structures and you have more than 10 acres of land, you can do a special permit from the planning board, you can get that.
Right, which is what I applied for.
Right.
And I went through the calculation for
Did you
the...
pay the fee already?
Yeah, we
Okay,
did.
we'll keep that. But a swimming pool, unless it's not roofed,
Okay.
it's an outdoor pool, it would not count as one of those 3 roofed accessory or enclosed structures.
Okay, well, I'll just make...
But it's still,
Square footage, this accessory structure.
yes,
Just wait to put the roof on the pool.
No, we're going on the pool. We already have one of those.
yeah.
So I'll just make just, for the board's clarification, I'll make a minor amendment to the application. We still need a special permit application for, construction within 1,000 feet of the Hudson River and also major excavation, and I'll just X out that section relative to...
Is this not the right time to bring up the train station?
So then maybe on a subsequent
There you
application,
go.
it would
Right.
apply.
Right.
Right. So, without further ado, Howard?
So as Mark was saying, for our first phase of this implementation of the master plan, we are doing the front garden and parking court, the play lawn at the rear of the house, and the swimming pool. And both the entry court and the play lawn are substantially the same as what were in the master plan that was submitted to you. The front entry court includes pushing the parking area away from the house, putting a raised garden 3 steps up to it in between that new parking area and the front door of the house, making some modifications to the pitch of the portico that Sam will talk about to give us the additional height for that garden. So that garden is just a formal entry walkway, a circular fountain in the center of it, and the square path going around the house to hold various gardens. Fairly simple structure, and then some additional planting across the whole width of the front of the house. The play lawn is currently there's not much for level area and activity areas on the property. It's taking that one former tennis court area in the back of the house and turning that into a formal lawn and garden. Just a gravel path circulating around that, a number of perennial beds and evergreen shrubs, some of the interest. No structures on this, a small terrace at the end. The pool is somewhat different from the master plan, just moved from, it used to be closer to the southern property line. We've now moved it closer to the owner's request, closer to the house. Changed the shape a little bit. Unlike the previous area of the master plan, there's no need for any retaining walls in this area, so it's just a graded plateau to place the pool. It'll have a stone surround, it's an oval shape, so a larger terrace just on its eastern side. There's no pergola, no pool house, just the pool itself and its necessary safety fence. Small amount of planting around it just to blend the fence in.
Quick question about the garden, and come up the driveway and then you go up to the garden and then back down into the building?
No, it's 3 steps up to the garden, and then there's just we're just going to have about a 2-inch lip right at the existing portico, and then that just goes right up to the front door. So no step in.
Carry on.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Sam White from PBDW Architects, the architects for the project. I want to show you 3 designs interventions that we're proposing for the house and grounds. The first is the electric shed that Mark talked about. It's a small building, about less than 200 square feet. It's about 172 square feet of an enclosed building with a roof. and then it would have behind it a latticed enclosure. In the lattice enclosure, there'd be a generator with which would be in its own metal enclosure. The lattice is really just to screen it visually. The shed itself would contain the electrical switchgear equipment from the transformer and the utilities that are coming in from the street. This building would replace the existing generator shed, so it's a one-for-one swap with the buildings. This drawing here shows essentially what it looks like. It would be the same dark green paint that we use on the other outdoor buildings. There is a picture in the lower right of what is called the gorilla shed. Vincent Astor kept a gorilla, it said, and that is how that building got its name. We're proposing to retain the existing gorilla shed. This is the first intervention. The second intervention is a roof deck and a bulkhead on the roof. As you know, there is inside the house, there's a rather grand formal staircase that then sort of terminates really at the ceiling level. We would extend that staircase to go to the roof, building a roof enclosure that is essentially a minimalist glass and metal structure that's sort of highly geometric in its shape, shown right there. That would give you access to a roof deck, which is shown to you in an axonometric there with a wire cable railing running around it. We would have lights on this structure, and we've prepared these renderings that give you a sense of the night view. That the point of the lights is simply to keep you from walking off the edge of the deck, be able to navigate your way. If there's no moon, we believe that the lights would be minimally visible from the river or from any adjacent property, and we tried the best of our ability to create a rendering that shows those lights. We turned off all the lights in the house, so this would be, the view you see would be what you would see if only the lights on the roof deck were on and there were no lights on in the house, which is an unlikely situation. The third of these interventions is the stair. As you know, there's a change in grade, and so the main floor becomes, at the front, when you walk into the house, becomes the second floor at the rear. And so that the deck that in the southwest corner of the house that overlooks what Mark described as the former tennis court, there's a story difference between those two, and it's actually no easy, convenient way of getting from the main living floor down to what would be the essential play lawn. And so we proposed to add a staircase to this, and we looked at a number of designs and felt that this design is of a flying staircase with a sort of double flight of steps was the most appropriate. What you saw when we presented this a couple of months ago was a very schematic drawing that was really produced by, almost practically produced by the software, the drafting software, which gave you an image of a quite abstract structure. And since then we've detailed this, and I'd like to review the details for this proposed staircase, starting with the fact that we would be moving a section of the existing terracotta balustrade. And we've noted on this application and on the drawings that section would be retained for reinstallation. The point of this is that it's a highly reversible process. So we looked for a while at taking off the whole balustrade between the two columns, but found that the way that the balustrade is coped in around the columns meant that if we remove the whole balustrade, we'd probably have to destroy the balustrade, and the result would not be, would neither be preserved nor would the result be very attractive. We think that that just cutting the width of the opening to the staircase is a less invasive and more reversible process of getting access to that staircase. Then the staircase itself, the framing of the staircase would be a channel. We looked at square rectangular tubes, which is what was shown in the drawing that you saw a few months ago. We think that a channel with sort of exposed bolts on it running down, sort of replicates the kind of industrial age, some granular detail of what would have been built contemporary with the house. We designed a handrail that involves twisted balusters plus a sort of an attic course, which you can see in this drawing. Of course, just to give the thing some scale. And then lastly, the whole thing is supported with these two columns, which are actually, they're originally lamp posts. It's a lamp standard that was designed by Henry Bacon, who was an employee at McKim White. He designed the Lincoln Memorial because McKim had died, and Bacon designed this light fixture. It's called the B10 pole, and is used as the standard light pole in Central Park. And so we're using that fixture structurally to support the stair. We think that there's a nice connection between the original designer of that pole and the house, as well as, I think, an aesthetic connection as well. The treads would be wood. This drawing shows open risers. We're looking into the structure right now, and it's entirely possible that we will have to have closed risers, which would then be perforated in some way. I mean, we don't want completely opaque risers, but we're going to need some structure in those risers. And I think that summarizes the staircase. I know there were questions that came out at the last meeting, and I'd be happy to answer any of them.
A couple questions on. Actually, first question is on the roof lighting.
Yes.
You said the lighting is there to prevent people walking off the edge of the roof. Is there no parapet? Or
There is a wire cable, a cable railing. So you wouldn't walk off, but if there were no lights, you'd run into the cable. It's good to just kind of see where the edges are, and that's the limit that's the amount of light that we want.
All right, and on the stairs, what is the height from the top to the bottom?
Ooh.
About 10.5.
Do you think it is?
Yeah,
So,
when is looking?
there it is, 10.6.
Is there not a requirement for is there not a requirement for a secondary landing?
Isn't that required? Well, for egress, there certainly would be, but this is not an egress stair.
Okay.
Sir?
Just to help you clarify something, you talked about the roof lighting. I assume the roof lighting will only be on when the roof area is in use. It's not going to be on every night of the week.
That is correct.
Okay, that should
Be
be
switched.
made
Yeah.
known.
Sharon, you had a question?
No, I'm not a question, just a comment. When we had done a site visit a while back and they looked at where the stair was potentially planned for, I remember talking about where you're going to cut where the railing is now, and I think you've done a very good job doing that there.
Thank you.
Will that be a metal strayer?
That would be, yes, this would be a 12-inch, a 3 by 12-inch channel with exposed bolts running down on the outside.
Now, do you have a question?
No questions. I would have to comment that stair that I'm looking at is not dissimilar from the west staircase at Mills Mansion in terms of the design. He still might.
A lucky coincidence.
Just looking at the cadre of work.
Is that true?
Yes. You know, from the terrace on the west side, there's those double
It's all
stairs.
closed risers and everything, right? All marble?
Well, that's all marble, but the shape is not dissimilar in terms of the two sides almost looking under there. It was meant to be.
On the,
No gunite.
so we take that
Don't rush me.
on the bulkhead for the stairs, is the, you showed just a wedge. I assume that back part is the roof section. Is that going to be glazed or with some roofing material?
The answer is it will be glazed.
That would be glazed, well, the whole
Yes.
structure is glazed structure.
Oh,
And what material is that going to be done in?
We were looking at aluminum extrusions for this.
Okay, and the glazing material?
I haven't gotten that far.
All right.
But,
I mean, it kind of picks up on the tennis court next to it with all the glass.
yes, I mean, the scale is a little different. The tennis court, I think, is much.
And this is all,
This would be 4 panes of glass in the tennis court.
the existing exit out onto the roof is pretty much the same shape as that, or is it a square box?
It's a nasty little.
Yeah, it's a nasty wall roofing, rubber roofing, it's just a,
Thing, you know.
just like you're coming
I
out
mean, you've
of
got, you
an apartment building in New York City.
So from below, you'd be looking basically up at a sort of skylight.
yes, I think we're gonna have to put a curtain there because of
Just for the
the
solar
cold when it's winter.
Oh,
I think even if this would be double glazed, I'm sure. But still, when it's cold, it's a lot of glass and there would be a draft coming down. So I think we're gonna be closing off the top of the staircase as you see it from downstairs.
and so that visually, that would be a curtain, you say, or
It could be.
something, some movable panel?
It's what is there now. There is, I don't have a section here, but down here, the stair coming up, there is a frame, a trimmed opening here, which sort of signifies the end of the formal staircase, and there is a heavy curtain there now.
So they're going to take the same design and continue the staircase up?
No, the staircase, yes.
But it doesn't go all the way to the top?
Yeah, the staircase goes all the way across the top. The staircase going up will be, the treads and risers will be the same design, but the railing will not be the same design on the far side of the trimmed opening.
Anything else at the moment? Okay, well, I have a resolution. All right. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts as follows in the application by KBH2 at 189 River Road for site plan approval special use permit for a play yard, constructing a rooftop bulkhead and deck, an entry garden and parking court, play lawn and stairs, swimming pool with deck lawn, an electrical shed, a generator, and underground utilities at 189 River Road within the Historical Preservation HB20 zoning district, Hudson River Historic Landmarks District, States District of Scenic Area of statewide significance, the local road revitalization area in Ag District 20, all is depicted in the applications and site plan prepared by Mark Berminski and his associates, who's not likely to be at the time, but yeah, there's him. All right. 1, accepts the application and supporting documents as adequate for initiating review by the planning board, its advisors, and the public. 2, classifies the proposed action as an unlisted action under secret for which coordinated environmental quality review is precluded. 2, schedules a public hearing on the application for November 19th, 2018 at, will this be the first one? Why don't we do 6:31?
Ooh.
6, all right, 6:30. And directs the clerk to undertake or otherwise cause the noticing and posting thereof. Who would like to go up and visit?
I would.
Who said what, Woody?
Eric and Richard.
Okay, Woody, Eric, and
We can do 3.
Okay, Rick, Eric and Richard, and you will conduct a field visit, and you remember to do it, like I didn't, and you'll get in touch. Very good.
What was the date? 19th, except for the rain?
That's the public hearing,
November 19th.
at 6:30,
Got it.
more like 6:35, but we're going to go with that. In accordance with Town Code Chapter 9, Conservation Advisory Board refers the applications to the Town CAB for review and written comment concerning environmental factors. In accordance with Town Code Chapter 118, Waterfront Consistency Review refers the applications to the Town WAC for review and written comment concerning consistency with the town's adopted LWRP. Authorizes without prejudice to any information or comment that may be presented at the public hearing and may arise on the basis of both the above cited field visit and referrals. Preparation of a working draft of an approvals resolution for the planning board's consideration on November 19th, 2018, or as may be later timely. Could I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Michael, is it acceptable if I just provide an amended letter?
Knock out a special permit for
Scratching this special permit.
Unless you want to put the train station in.
Accessory structure. I'll just provide the letter and ask them to do that rather than make one comments.
And that's, as long as we have it 2 weeks before the public hearing,
You'll have
Good to
it
go.
tomorrow. It's just a letter.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. All right, thank you very much.
Okay. We have another one. This is Richard McKay. This is an application for site plan approval, special use permit, and wetland permit under Township Chapter 125. And Township Chapter 120, that is to construct a single-family residence in the RA10 zoning district in the local waterfront revitalization area.
Good evening. I'm Richard McKay. I think you all have these packets and you find the site survey. It's probably the best place to start. This is a 5.8 acre parcel. It is a flag lot. It's an interior lot of Capalvo subdivision. And as such, there's only one access point along this gravel drive that's there now to get into the site. Originally, using the federal wetlands aerial maps, there shouldn't have been a problem with the wetland area on the site itself. However, this was in 2006, I believe, and over time those wetlands have grown. We're now presently having to encroach on the wetlands for a portion to be able to get the road into the building site. Additionally, we have to rework the septic system so that we're outside of the 100-foot buffer that the town requires from the federal wetlands. So that's caused us to modify the plan. We also have a historic overlay district and a coastal requirement for review. And so that's what we have. One second here. If you look at the C101 drawing, you'll see the blown up area where we actually encroach on the wetlands and the proposed drive. The shape of the drive looks a little wonky, but it's there in order to avoid having to remove some rather large oak trees that are there on the site. We'd like to preserve those. And that's pretty much the layout. It's a two-story single-family residential house at the southern end, the high point of the site, and we've received the zoning variance required for the setbacks to be able to build on that size parcel, and also to have the setbacks such that we can orient the house the way we have.
Questions for the applicant?
I'd like to compliment you on your compass rose. It's the most elaborate I've ever seen on this one.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Jim had it.
Yeah, there's a few things related specifically to the application. One was, you stated the project is not within the LWRP area. It actually is.
It's not within the what?
The LWRP area, local waterfront and stuff.
No, I said it was.
Okay, the application, I thought said it was not.
Hang on. LWRP meaning?
In
Well,
one
that's the
area it
coastal-
said that it wasn't, but another area it said it was.
Yeah, it may be that one portion of the application was filled out a while ago when we didn't know everything about it, and that might have been overlooked, so I apologize for that.
That was gonna be part two, is some of
Yeah.
the special use permit material wasn't in there, it was in the other applicant site plan, so just making them consistent, make sure the information.
Okay, I'm glad to clarify wherever wherever I need to with that. So, yeah, we try to provide everything that we thought you could possibly need.
It's a pretty complete application.
Okay.
Other questions? Hearing none, I can go right to the resolution. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board hereby acts as follows on the applications by Richard McKay, Upper Hook Road, for site plan approval, special use permit, and wetland permit, to construct a single-family residence on Upper Hook Road within the rural agriculture RA10 zoning district and the Town of Rhinebeck's local waterfront revitalization area. One accepts the application and supporting documents as adequate for initiating review by the planning board, its advisors, and the public. Classifies the proposed action as type 2 under seeker, for which further environmental quality review is precluded. Schedules a public hearing on November 19th, 2018 at 6:35. And directs the clerk to undertake or otherwise cause the noticing and posting thereof. And delegates planning board members. Richard Sharon. To conduct a field visit to the project site and report their observations at the time of the public hearing. In accordance with Town Code Chapter 9, Conservation Advisory Board refers the applications to the town CAB for review and written comment concerning environmental factors. And with reference to Chapter 118 of the town zoning of the town code, local waterfront revitalization area consistency review, refers the application to the WAC for written comment on any concerns related to the policies of the local waterfront revitalization plan. 6, authorizes without prejudice to any information or comment that may be presented at the public hearing or may arise on the basis of both the above cited field visits and referrals, preparation of a working draft of the appeals of an approvals resolution for the planning board's consideration on November 19th, 2018, or as may later timing. Could I have a motion to approve? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. You want to get in touch with Richard and Sharon about the site visit and then, and the CAB as well.
I just have one question. I'm looking, I don't have the plan in front of me, so there are 2 places on the construction schedule. I have a question, or just for clarification. I'm sorry, I don't have the plan in front of me, but there are 2 places on the construction schedule that you're talking about tree removals. Are they detailed on the plan? What trees will be removed and how many?
Well, where you see the drive, where you see the area for the septic field, and the plot of the house itself.
Right, but are there specific details about how many trees are being removed and the size?
No, we have to remove what we're required by the county to remove what we need to do construction. Obviously, we try to keep that as minimal as possible.
Right, so maybe the site visit folks.
Oh, yeah, you'll see it. In fact,
look at that.
yeah, you'll definitely be able to see it. In fact, the corners of the house are staged, so you can see on the site where the house sits.
It'd be just nice to see some specifics with the site plan.
Yeah, it gets too busy. There's a lot of trees on the site. It gets very busy to see what's going on with all of that detail. So,
Right, well, it's something we look carefully at, so the more information we can get, better.
okay.
I mean, I'm happy to have Sharon and.
Yeah, no, we'll be able to tell based on, I mean,
we're not, just so you know, we don't want, our preference not to tear down is pick out a single tree. The county, in order to get the septic system in, because we're now so tight because of the wetlands, we have to clear the future area, which we'll never live long enough to see used. That has to be cleared day 1 because we can't get enough separation between the 2 fields, unfortunately. And we tried to do it a bunch of different ways and it doesn't work. So unfortunately, we have to take those trees out day 1. Yes.
the no-cut area was designated, who made that?
That's part of the Capalbo subdivision.
Okay.
So we're out. We don't.
Obviously, you don't want to lose your screening.
Well, the other piece,
Yeah, they don't want to lose, then the neighbors don't lose their
You
screening.
know, okay.
But also that's to our south, so that's our sunscreen too. So we're, yeah.
well, I think the CAB will have a significant input on what trees should not come down, so I think that'll be resolved in its own way.
Who is the CAB?
Conservation Advisory Board,
Okay.
which will be part of it.
Then we'll visit.
The tough-looking lady in the back there.
Okay. Yeah, we have to take down the trees that we have to take down. We were not, obviously, we'd like to not take any trees down if we could.
Just quickly to clarify, my comment earlier about the LWRP. The letter from your engineer had a comment that it wasn't within the area, so just clarifying that.
Yeah,
And then
and
the second-
that's what was confusing. And he didn't think it was.
Okay, and this, just the
Yeah.
special use permit, had to be filled out to be consistent, that's all right here, just so you're aware.
Pardon?
The special use permit criteria,
Okay.
talking about that, and also some other things just need to be checked off.
Okay.
Just so you're aware.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, our last item tonight, public hearing. Michael DeCola, Bloomer Hollow, on Norton Road, site plan approval and special use permit for the installation of a commercial solar farm.
Thank you. I'm going to let Jeff come up first and talk through some of the stuff, and then we have a little impact consultant as well.
My name is Jeff Irish. I'm with Sun Common, formerly called Hudson Solar. Just a quick overview of what we're proposing here, we are requesting. We're requesting special use permit and site plan approval to install rooftop solar systems on 3 existing agricultural buildings on this parcel. They're pre-existing buildings that are going to be used to shelter livestock. Part of a very interesting and innovative livestock grazing process. The technical aspects of the project are that there will be 1 new utility pole placed here across Mill Road. All of the conductors will then be buried. We'll be burying medium voltage from here to a pad mount transformer, which is a green box about 3 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet high here, and then continuing underground to a second pad mount transformer at this location here. And then from there, low voltage AC would go underground to each of the buildings. The equipment will be located, the inverters and other equipment will be located in switchgear at the back of the buildings here. And both of these buildings, the long ones are animal shelters, and the third building here is an existing hay barn. There was some questions have been raised about the mounting of the panels themselves. There's a drawing here. I think you have copies of these drawings. Or I can, would you like a large copy, Mike?
That probably wouldn't hurt to have, so everyone can take a look. Richard, can you see that one there?
Yeah, no, but so in the bottom left, it shows the mounting of the solar panels. They'll be mounted parallel to the roof surfaces and approximately 6.5 inches or less from the surfaces of the roof.
Any questions on this drawing before I move to the next one?
Yeah.
So this drawing is just to show the profile of what the buildings look like and what the solar panels will look like from the side mounted on them. You see the panels less than 6.5 inches above the existing roofs, parallel to the roofs. The heights of the buildings are there, are indicated. About 23 feet 9 inches is the existing height for both of the shading structures, and the hay barn, as it stands right now, is 28 feet 9 inches high. The solar panels have no effect on the overall height. They're mounted parallel to the surfaces.
Jeff?
Yes.
What provides the diagonal bracing for this north-south direction?
North-south direction, you mean for wind shear?
Yeah.
Well, the buildings are pre-existing and they were designed to stand up, so I don't have those details, but.
So the requirements for the raising shed, I guess the shade of building structure, are the same for a solar mount?
I can't speak to the design of the buildings for the shading structure, but I know we've had a structural engineer review the buildings as they were constructed, and he's issued his approval letter that the structures can support the solar systems as designed.
Because I look at this building and I see no diagonal structure at all, and I'm just wondering how they're doing it. It's a wooden structure, it's got no, I just don't see it, so.
They're engineered buildings.
It's relying completely on the point of connection.
So it's relying on, and those are, how is that fastened at the ground? The posts go into the ground?
Yes.
How deep?
Does this, I would like to ask you how this is relevant to this application. Your question.
I think we're adding weight to the roof, and I think it's a reasonable question. I think Eric did a site visit with me, and we had asked that question on site, and I think you were going to give us some feedback. And I think it's a reasonable question.
There's been a review done by a structural engineer who looked at the whole building and the application of these panels on top of it. And
Michael, if you're going to speak, you have to come up to the microphone.
The buildings have been reviewed by a professional engineer. And he looked at the existing conditions and the on-site conditions and the drawings, and has approved the use in this way.
Might I suggest that if the engineer's report should be part of the application, just.
Well, the reason it doesn't have to be is because they're existing agricultural buildings, and it's not a requirement from.
But now they're solar mounts.
Yes, that's true.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't want to just add it to the application?
Well, it's not required.
Well, perhaps I can help a little bit with this. I think Eric has asked me a good question. I know you both have a background in this, so these types of questions. I have contacted Bob Summers about the question about the relationship between and solar farms. And I'll just read you what I got back from him. Mike, this is what I received from the Department of State Codes Division. I also talked with Council's office, and we would not consider this activity to be part of a farm operation as defined in AML Section 30111. Farm operation definition covers on-farm structures, but the installation of solar cells as part of a community solar array is not considered part of a farming activity. The buildings where the arrays are attached, however, are still considered agricultural buildings. The town zoning code may disagree with this interpretation, and that is acceptable. All this means is that if the landowner is denied a permit to construct the array, or if they do not agree with the limitations placed on the solar cells by the town board, they could not appeal that decision to this department under review under ALM 305A. Thanks, Bob. What he got from the council's office, we at DOS, Department of State, have determined that such a building is clearly an ag use and the installation of the solar panels will not change the building status, therefore the structure barn does not need a permit or CO unless required by for zoning. The installation of the solar array will require a permit because it would constitute a life safety issue if not installed correctly and it is not used solely for ag use. So the exemption to the building code won't apply. Additionally, in most cases, the power company will require an electrical inspection before they will connect the system to the grid. It should be a simple permit that requires an electrical inspection and the issuance of a certificate of compliance. Have a good weekend with you, Mr. Council. So it seems from the question that's been raised is that what we should probably do is refer this particular issue to our engineer to review both the material that your engineer has put together and the letter saying that the structure is sufficient for this purpose. Since a building permit is required for this and it has to meet the code, the building code that the town of Rhinebeck has adopted from the state. I don't know if that's what you guys were thinking.
Yeah, but I can see how it is structural. It's not because, isn't there an end of one of the buildings that actually has sheathing on it, just the first 40 feet or something? Or no?
The sheeting is wrapped around both lateral ends to give it wrapping strength. And that was done to give it extra.
Right. So, and I can see how that will stabilize, just by stabilizing the first 40 feet, the rest of it will keep it. But I think it's reasonable to get the engineer's report and just make sure it's on record for saying, well, yeah.
I think those documents, Mike, will also be required by the building inspector to give a building permit for this.
Okay. I have the structural engineer's letter here.
Okay, if you can leave that with Gretchen or a copy of it,
Yeah.
and then we can zip it down to Ray quickly, and the building inspector to look at.
Okay. So I wanted to continue.
Please do.
Okay. There was an email that we received this morning from Susan Ragusa, who's a neighbor. She asked a series of questions, and I thought they were good questions, so we'd like to go through and
Please do.
review the answers. Okay, so we just got these this morning, and we put together these answers, but they may answer some of the questions that have been raised and some of the things you brought up reading that letter, Michael. First of all, she asked, has there been a site survey engineering report conducted prior to and following the request for a special permit? The answer is yes. I guess there's been numerous engineering site surveys, a solar site survey, an electrical site survey, structural engineer's analysis of the building. So the answer to that question is yes. Question 2 she asked was, does Central Hudson have the capability of power lines on Mill Road to handle the flow of energy from the added solar power? The answer is yes. Central Hudson approved the project for interconnection to the grid on November 10th, 2016. I've attached the approval letters from Central Hudson. They're treating each system as a separate interconnection because they have separate transformers, but there's 2 letters there for A and B. Question 3 she asked was construction details for the installation of roof-mounted community solar can be challenging and often confusing to the neighbors. I wasn't precisely sure what she meant of that, but I gave some answer as to what the construction would consist of. It would take about 2 months. 1 new utility pole will be installed on the west side of the road near the south building. Trenching would occur to bury all the electrical wires from that new pole. And as far as safety, we follow OSHA and standard solar industry safety practices as normal. Question 4
She asked is there sufficient ingress and egress in the event of fire or other emergencies? The answer is that there is a farm road that's shown on the site plan to the east of both of the buildings, and that goes to, allows access to both of the transformers. There's also an existing farm road on the west side that services the hay barn and allows access to both of the buildings. That road is capable of handling heavy farm equipment, is capable of handling any emergency vehicles that may need to get to the buildings. Question 5, she asked, has a study been done to determine the glare and other adverse effects on neighboring properties? I've attached a couple documents. One is from the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, who's recently published a paper to help guide boards and people in solar systems. They specifically explain that glare is generally not an issue with solar panels, as they're designed with anti-reflective glass designed to absorb light rather than reflect light. I also included a drawing just to show what the geometry of a system like this would be. I mean, at an approximately 25-degree angle of tilt, all afternoon sun at all times of the year, if there was any reflection, would be reflected straight up to the sky. That's just the geometry and the physics of sun path angles in our area. So there's basically, there should not be any glare noticeable from the solar panels, both due to the geometry and the composition of the glass. Question 6, she asked, what effect, if any, would panels have on birds, bats, and other avian wildlife? NYSERDA advises, again in the same white paper, that solar panels do not emit hazardous materials or chemicals. They do not create elevated temperatures. They do not emit significant electromagnetic fields, and nor do they emit noise. Question 7, she asks, has the town engineer evaluated the physical structures of the buildings to determine if the structures could support the solar panels? And the answer is yes. Nicholas Nitti, PE, well, not the town engineer, sorry, but an independent structural engineer, Nicholas Nitti, PE, of West Shore Design Engineers, that analyzed the building structures and the solar panel mounting system, and issued his approval letter on July 6, 2017, and that approval letter is attached. Question 8, is the construction of the installation of the PV project in compliance with applicable town building electrical and fire codes? The answer is yes. All systems that are connected to the grid in New York State have to be designed to be compliant with the New York State Building Code, Public Service Commission's standard interconnection requirements for radio-connected distributed energy systems, the National Electrical Code, which is issued by NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. So the purpose of the National Electrical Code is to prevent shock and fire. And also, we have to meet the quality requirements of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, who has also approved this project for construction.
I think in a couple of those questions, I will give the information that you supplied from that engineer to our building inspector to look at. He'll obviously need that to give a building permit out for this, and I'll have Ray take a look at it as well.
Okay.
Jeff, on the reflections, you showed at noontime, but what about, for instance, at sunset and the effect on the neighbors to the east?
The modules are facing an angle like this. So, and they're facing, the buildings are facing pretty much true south. So, from the spring equinox to the fall equinox, that's when the sun is in front of the solar rays at all times of the day. The reflection is going to be against the solar panels and then up into the sky. The only time the sun could get low enough is is during the summer. I got that reversed, sorry, but during the summer, after a certain time of the day in the afternoon, the sun actually gets behind the solar panels because the sun sets further north than true west and rises further north than true east. So when it's behind the solar panels, it won't have any effect. Doesn't have to generate any power then either, but it won't cause any glare or reflection.
Well, we have a time at the equinoxes when the sun is setting in the west and it's coming across those panels and you're getting it. Regardless of the fact that they're made to not be reflective, at a certain angle you get total reflection off those panels. And so has a study been done to see that that is not going into the house across the street from?
Well, the building height is, the panels at their lowest point is are about 10 feet above grade. So if the sun is higher than about 10 feet above grade, any glancing light is going to be reflected back up. Right? If the sun's up here, it's going to come this way and then come back up.
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, if it's here and it comes here, it's going to go bounce here and go on down in that same direction. There's nothing that causes it to go back up again. I mean, it's not, that would only happen if it was
The angle of the panels.
Well, if it happened during sunset, it would be very short in duration, if you could see any reflection on the ground. And the sun, when it's that close to sunset, is being filtered by so much atmosphere. That's why we see the red sun at sunset. There just isn't a lot of solar energy coming through at that point in time, because the sun is passing through so much atmosphere.
I'd like to address the glare.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how to do it, but especially in the summer, when the sun is higher in the sky, so it's setting farther north, so the northernmost building especially. Now, on the northern side of that building, which is not going to have the solar array, that reflects a glare to the road, to people on the road, that's actually blinding. So would not that same glare also be on the front side, because they're not that far apart?
If you look at the drawing that shows the profile of the buildings, the angle of the back of the buildings is much different than the angle at the front.
Yes, I know that.
The angle at the front is much lower. And if there's a picture in this package, this one. Did you see this one, Sharon?
I mean, I know what the angle of the buildings are.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying that the reflection on the north side, which is considered part of the ag building, is actually blinding to people on the road. So I'm just wondering how that's going to be affected on the front side. I mean, the building's right there, so you're looking at sun reflection. But
Well, the solar
it's also
system's not on the
because
north side.
It's all supposed to be screened, so it may be a moot point.
Well, the solar system's not on the north side. Are you saying that?
I'm just saying that the way the sun is hitting it in the summer at one particular day, so it's moving constantly, so I'm just wondering how it's affecting the south side of the roof. Who's there, so.
Are you saying there's glare from the north side of the building?
The north side of the building has bad glare, yes.
Okay, well then that,
So bad you couldn't look at it.
all right, well that wouldn't have anything to do with the solar project, because the solar
Right, but
panels are on
I'm
the
just
south
wondering if
side.
that same, the way the sun is coming down, I mean, the roof is right there, so it's only like right there, so.
Well, if that's occurring in the summer, then it's because the sun has gotten behind the buildings, because it's setting so far north, and you're getting reflection off of a relatively steep surface like this from a low-angle sun.
Jeff, isn't the surface of the panels less reflective of the roof material anyway?
Yeah.
So there would be less glare from the panels than there would be even from that dark green roof material.
Can you put panels on the other side too, so people don't get blinded on the road?
I would
Dark
like to
green,
do that.
it's.
Yes, I mean, it's an important consideration, that there's not a single
You
roof.
have to come up to the microphone.
Yeah, she's, only because she's video, so she can't.
there's not a single roof material that we could use that is less reflective than the solar panels themselves. They're designed to absorb the light. So even with the glass on them, they're going to reflect less than any roofing material that we could put on that roof. So if you're worried about glare, the solar panel is actually an improvement over what's there, the existing roof material.
But now that the back of this shed, the north side of the shed, is no longer just the north side of the shed, now it's part of the solar panel. Is that correct?
No, there's no solar on the north side.
Well, I know, but it's part of this structure for mounting solar.
Well, it's part of the structure upon which the panels are going to be attached, yes.
So does that fall under the category of a farm building or the structure for mounting a solar panel?
Both.
All right. So glare off of that.
Well, the ag use, well, that's an awfully good question.
The roofing material that we have on the building is very low reflective, dark green.
Oh, it's a pretty dark green.
Yeah.
But the glare is blinding.
So it's no blind, it's less blinding than off of almost any other roof surface you would see there. So I think we're kind of going around in a circle with this. The solar itself will be less reflective than what's there, and what's there is a very low reflective roof surface.
Well, it's not less reflective than, say, asphalt shingles or something like that.
Depends on the color of the asphalt shingles, but many of them would be.
But in terms of glare, not in terms of, how much light
Perhaps,
is reflected.
Mr. Allen, can you speak to this topic?
Yeah, okay, so we'll keep moving.
We'll keep moving.
All right, so at the last meeting, we asked that we do a visual impact study and a screening analysis, and that's what we're going to present now. Matt Allen from Saratoga Associates will present that. We submitted this prior to August 1st in order to be able to give you the 2 weeks notice in order to discuss it at this meeting. After August 1st, after October 1st, on October 6th, we received George James's analysis and some questions. Matt has answered those, and he's going to be talking about the questions that George James brought up as he presents here.
Thank you.
Just take a moment to pull this out.
Richard, can you hit that light switch? I think it'll put this one off our feet. No, those are always the back.
That one that slides down right next to it.
Do you mind if I take this off the wall?
No, you can take it off. Just,
Oh, yeah.
you want to do that?
Okay, is that good? Good evening, my name is Matt Allen with Saratoga Associates. I'm a landscape architect, and I've been asked to look at the potential aesthetic impacts of this roof-mounted solar system. More than a month ago, we submitted a very brief visual impact assessment, just describing what the project is aesthetically and what it would look like, and proposing a landscape mitigation plan to minimize visibility of the roof-mounted solar panels to the extent that they can be screened from Mill Road because of their rooftop location, but also looking at the screening potential of the agricultural buildings that they are located on. Just a quick overview of what the project is about. As Jeff mentioned, it is there are three existing solar or agricultural buildings on the site constructed, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, within the last 12 months or so.
Just about, yeah.
Okay, recently anyway.
It's on approximately 30 acres of, or within approximately 30 acres of recently cleared land, cleared for the purposes of agricultural grazing associated with the agricultural buildings. And currently, the landowner plans to clear, is in process of clearing an additional 6 acres in that immediate vicinity. That's a seasonal clearing, so that stopped last winter and will resume as the ground firms up later this fall and winter. The project and existing in place is about a 10 to 15 foot wide hedgerow measuring about 2,000 feet long that's maintained along Mill Road. That in design of the agricultural structures and cleared land was left in place to help screen that open land and the buildings from Mill Road, and that is proposed to remain in place as part of this project. And the project itself is a roof-mounted community solar project with solar panels mounted on each of the agricultural buildings, measuring about 26 feet by 14 feet on the roof on the hay barn building. The two longer structures, one is about 368 feet long and the other is about 422 feet long, and they're about 35 feet wide, and those areas will be covered by solar panels. And all roofs that the panels will be located on are the south-facing roof, not the north-facing roof, as has been discussed. The solar panels will be typical bluish in color, similar to most solar panels that you see around in the community, and even residential rooftop-mounted solar systems are very similar in visual character. They are low reflectance surfaces to maximize solar absorption. And the panels will be mounted flush to the buildings, meaning that they will not have an increased angle over the current slope of the roof. They will be mounted at the same angle as the roof slope. That's important when you're thinking about visual assessment or visual impact, that they won't be discordant with the current form of the existing structure. And ancillary equipment on the site, there will be 2 utility meters that measure about 2 feet by 2 feet by 4 feet, mounted near the 2 shading structures on site. So very low, small utility boxes. And again, we have a hedgerow management plan that's to provide, to maintain the existing screening along Mill Road, and I'll also talk about the enhanced screening that's proposed to infill some of the hedgerow where it's, in some cases, not as full as in other areas. And you've seen these existing drawings, just describing the project. To do the visual analysis, even though some are redundant in a case of an existing structure, we put together a viewshed map, and the viewshed map basically identifies where the project can be seen from. And as I said, it's redundant because it's a viewshed map of existing structures, so one can easily go out and observe where those existing structures are visible from. The difference being that in developing the viewshed map, we accounted for the in-progress clearing. So right now there are trees in place that cause screening of some of the structures from some areas. The viewshed map takes into account that screening will be removed in the coming winter season. And what the viewshed analysis concluded is that there's about 4 or 5 structures along Mill Road, or residential properties along Mill Road, that will be affected by views of the existing agricultural structures. However, not all of those residences will be impacted to the same degree by views of the solar panel, because of course some of the buildings are to the north of the existing agricultural structures, so what they see of those structures is the north side, and of course the solar panels will be mounted on the south sloping roof. So this is the viewshed map, and very quickly what you're seeing, the large yellow area is the portion of the property that has already been cleared. And the underlying aerial photograph predates that clearing, so that's why I added that in yellow, just to show if you drive by today, that area is substantially cleared. The area to be cleared in the coming season is shown in the yellow hatch pattern, so that's the out parcel in the south central portion. So within the next 6 months, those trees will be coming down, and those trees are currently located in between the 2 larger agricultural buildings that are constructed on the site. So what the viewshed analysis is showing is the colors on the buildings on the east side of Mill Road show the degree of visibility of the 3 agricultural buildings. The legend on the map, the red area are the portions of the residential properties on the east side of Mill Road that can currently see that would have visibility of the existing north agricultural building. The blue area would be the structure that can see the south building, and the purple area would be the area that can see both, or portions of both structures. So it's just a gradation of who can see what. And again, that's not exactly what you would see today, because this is factoring in the removal of existing trees within the central portion of the site. So a very quick visibility analysis we did. We did some photographic simulations to show what the project would look like from Mill Road. And we did a series of 3 views. The first view is the existing condition as it existed 2 or 3 months ago. The second condition is what the site would look like following the clearing that is currently proposed without the solar project. And the third is the project with the solar panels in place. So this is a first view as it existed a couple of months ago. This is near the intersection of Eastgate and Mill Road. And you can see the southernmost agricultural building as well as the hay barn are directly visible from this location. And this view is how the project will appear when the next phase of clearing will occur. You can see we took a little liberty here and removed the remaining trees that are currently in this location. They may or may not come out. 1 or 2 of them may need to come out to create greater solar exposure. But to portray the worst case condition, we just assumed in this case that they would all come out and the view would be something similar to this. Michael, do you have any thoughts on how many trees might come out in this area? Is this a fair representation, or have we overdone it?
I think there's probably trees that are farther up the driveway that may not need to come out. There's a bunch of trees in that end corner there that are diseased or dying that will have to come out.
Okay, so what Michael just said is that this is a reasonably fair representation, although some trees may remain in this area depending on their health and whether or not they're a factor in shading the solar array. And this is a representation of the solar project in place combined with an expanded hedgerow mitigation. And I'll explain the hedgerow mitigation shortly, but I just wanted to show this simulation on how that landscape mitigation would begin to screen the existing agricultural building. And of course, in this case, with the rooftop system, the hedgerow would not and could not be tall enough to fully screen the building, but it does screen a good portion of the lower part of that existing building. I'm going to take a little bit of a break here because we received the comment letter from the town's consultant, George Janes, who had some questions on how these photo simulations were put together. And I did put together a response letter to Mr. Janes that I believe has been provided to the town, so you should have a copy of it. This slide gets a little bit technical, and I know Mr. Janes will understand what he's looking at, and very quickly I'll explain it to the board. The photo simulations of what you just saw and the slides I have coming after this are developed using a 3-dimensional model built in a software called 3D Studio Max. So everything is built to a real-world scale using a 3-dimensional software. So although this simulation looks like it could simply be photoshopped, with artistic interpretation and no real scale, in fact, it is built to scale, and the hedgerow you see in that area is actually 8 to 10 feet high to scale and in perspective in this simulation. The way we do that is to build a 3D model, and you can see this here, this vegetative mass in 3 dimensions is represented in that area. And like I said, that is to scale. Yes. So I render that in 3D Studio Max, and here's just a rough rendering of those three-dimensional plant models just in place in that photograph to scale in perspective. And you can see it shows what's screened. It's just not tremendously accurate as far as what the hedgerow would look like. So I use that as a template to get my scale correct. And then I move on and take some photo clips from other photographs of the hedgerow in this area and superimpose it on top of that template. So you can see if we flip back and forth, that hedgerow is in place and to scale. And just to be on the safe side, I intentionally adjust it a little bit lower just so that I don't overstate what the screening value will be. And I believe that'll answer Mr. Jane's question. But I bring it to the board just so you have some sense of how this is put together. And then very quickly, I'll show some of the other simulations that we've done from 3 other locations along Mill Road. We just took 4 representative locations, relatively evenly spaced as you move northward along Mill Road to get a sense of what the screening would be and how the project would change as additional clearing is done on the site. So this is an existing view from in front of number 325 Mill Road. And here is a view after the next phase of clearing that will occur this winter. So you see the area opens up a little bit. And then you can see, I'll flip back and forth here, so you can see the existing shading structure that's visible through the hedgerow. And a portion of this project will be infilling that hedgerow where it's currently thin. And it's currently thin in that area largely because some of the existing trees in that area have shaded out the hedgerow. So we'll do some thinning and management of that hedgerow, bring in new hedgerow material to encourage new growth in that area and close that gap. So you can see that the hedgerow as proposed does a pretty good job of screening the existing building as well as the rooftop solar panels. So that's generally in front of number 325 Mill Road. The next view we took is in front of number 317. So here is the existing view where you have a fairly open view of the northernmost shading structure. And as the next phase of clearing happens, this is approximately what it would look like. And then with the solar project completed and the enhanced hedgerow infilled, it causes more screening than it exists if the solar project were not approved. And the last of the sequence is from in front of number 307 Mill Road. And again, I'll flip back and forth. You can see the additional clearing will open up that space a little bit. From this particular location, the existing hedgerow does a pretty good job of screening the existing agricultural building. And then when the project is construction and the hedgerow management plan is implemented, you'll get a little bit more screening in that area. So just talking very briefly about the landscape management plan. This is different than some other landscape screening plans. We're taking advantage of the existing hedgerow in that area. We're not doing any new nursery stock planting. We've taken a look at planting nursery stock to potentially increase the height of the screening elements, as well as using nursery stock to screen, to infill areas or provide screening around Eastgate Road. We opted against that for a couple of reasons. One is, given the line of sight that we're trying to screen from some of the neighbors' properties, it would take many years for new trees that we plant along the roadside to achieve the necessary height to do anything more than the hedgerow would do. And as well as planting nursery stock in an area where we're also trying to maintain the hedge, because it currently does a good job of screening. The hedge itself would shade out some of that nursery stock and minimize its growth. So for those reasons, we opted not to do that, thinking that the hedgerow was the better option in this case. So some of the things that we're going to do with the hedgerow are do regular trimming of them in order to encourage growth. They would be trimmed in an A-shaped manner, wider at the base and narrower at the top, and that would encourage a more dense and vigorous growth in the lower areas and encourage encourage the hedgerows to continue growing upward. And they would also be trimmed one side every other year, and that would be sure that if we trim both sides at the same time, there would be a period of time where the hedgerow would actually be thin. So we want to make sure that we maximize the width of the hedgerow at any given time, so the trimming would occur alternately in every other year on one side and then the other. And in certain areas, just to maintain a more natural feel, saplings will be allowed in select areas to infill. What we don't want to do is create a monotonous long hedgerow all of uniform height with a very regular aesthetic. So saplings will be allowed to grow to create some vertical dynamic to the hedgerow. That wouldn't happen a lot because what we found is the sparse areas of the current hedgerow are largely caused by mature trees that have been shading out the hedgerow. So a few of those will be left in there just to allow a little verticality, but we wouldn't do it on a full basis. The more we add, the less effective the understory of the hedgerow will be. Okay, and that really is a very quick description of what's in the materials that have already been submitted to you. Very quickly, I'd just like to grab my notes. I think Jeff might have given you my notes on Jane's letter.
Got it.
You're welcome to it, but I just need to reference it. That's okay. Okay, and I'll go over this very quickly because it was a very straightforward letter from Mr. James, but I just wanted to hit the high points. And Mr. James said his comments ranged from significant to trivial, and he had what I thought were two significant comments. One was a lack of viewshed representation on the viewshed map, and in that case he was correct. That was my fault. I inadvertently, when I printed out that letter, neglected to turn on the viewshed layers of the map. So I've remedied that, and I believe that corrected map is in the packages that we just handed out. And Mr. James also suggested or questioned that the solar panels may not be accurately represented in the description. And I went back and read what I wrote, and he was correct. What I wrote may have been interpreted in two ways. He was simply stating there was a disconnect in two sentences in how the solar panels were described as being flush with the roof. Very simply, the way the panels will be constructed is the panels themselves will be mounted on an aluminum frame, flush to that aluminum frame, and that frame will be mounted flush to the roof. And that frame and panel combination will be approximately 6.5 inches high. So if you picture that combined unit of frame and panels, that's 6.5 inches wide and mounted exactly flush with the roof. It's important to note, as I mentioned earlier, that it's not mounted at an angle different than the roof. That would cause a greater discordance in the visual character. It would look a little awkward mounted on the roof, and you do see that at times with roof-mounted systems. This will be mounted, that combined system will be mounted flush with the roof. So I wanted to point out Mr. James' interpretation of that was coming directly from a couple of sentences that were a little bit in conflict with each other, and I remedied that in my response letter. Mr. James also mentioned that the photo simulations that you just saw were taken during leaf-on conditions, and he suggested that worst-case visual analysis is generally done during leaf-off conditions. That is correct. It's not a hard and fast rule in the world of visual impact assessment. For smaller projects with lesser visual impact, it's not uncommon to do visualizations with leaves on the trees. And the simple reason for that is it's not always possible to wait for 6 months or so till leaves fall off the trees. to move the project forward through the planning and zoning system. So that's why we started the project earlier this year, and rather than wait until early December when the leaves are fully off the trees, we moved the project forward now. And as Mr. James mentioned in his letter, that this project involves small additions to the rooftops of existing buildings, and it's unlikely that such small additions would have significant visual impact. So, it's my opinion that the leaf-off condition, if we had waited or have redone those photo simulations in another month and a half or so, that would not add significant information to help the board in their decision making. Mr. James also asked a couple of questions concerning the hedge screening. First question is, where will the hedges be transplanted from? And I mentioned to infill some of the gaps and add a new hedge height to the area of Eastgate Road. The existing hedge material from another portion of the site will be transplanted in those areas. And the answer to the question is, and I can let Mr. DiCola give more specific information on where he would get that material on his property, but the simple answer to that question is, it will not come from a place where we're relying on that hedge to currently or future screen the existing agricultural buildings. So the answer is it won't come from a place that would open up a gap somewhere else from Mill Road or for any of the adjacent residential properties. And another question he had was, how well will the hedge screen in the winter? And the answer to that is not as well as it screens in the summer. However, the hedge is comprised of very dense branching patterns of deciduous stems and branches. And that, of course, will help camouflage what's behind it by causing a natural branching pattern in the foreground that begins to break up the mass of any architecture in the background. And that's really the point of using vegetative screening that doesn't have vegetation on a year-round basis. We didn't think it necessary or even appropriate to use a great number of evergreens in this area. We didn't think it would have high value in screening existing agricultural structures. And as I mentioned, it would be very difficult and take a number of years for landscape quality nursery stock to grow to a sufficient height to fully screen the solar panels on top. So our objective here was really to break up the architectural mass of the existing agricultural buildings to begin to soften the view from of the site from Mill Road and the adjacent 4 to 5 residences that would have visibility. And I already addressed the next question in the presentation is how were the location, height, and thickness of the hedgerow in the photo simulations determined. And I showed you a quick illustration, screenshot from the 3D modeling of how we use 3-dimensional modeling to get the scale and perspective of the screening hedgerow correct. And lastly, there was a question, the view that you saw from Mill Road and Eastgate Road appeared to screen more of the livestock shading structure than is indicated on the view shed map. And that's very easy to describe. The view shed map is a conceptual illustration of approximately where the additional hedgerow would be. It's not meant to be a construction document, so the conceptual illustration showing where that new hedgerow would be was not completely accurate as far as a construction document. And in looking at the field of view indicator on the map showing where the photograph was taken from, one could conclude that a portion of the southern screening structure and hay barn would remain visible, when in fact the photo simulation is more accurate, and the intent is for the new extended hedgerow to extend far enough to fully block the line of sight toward the southern shading structure. So when the landscape planting plan is put together, it will extend far enough, and we'll use the 3D model to accurately locate where that hedgerow will extend to. So again, to answer that question, the map that was being compared to the photo simulation, the map is a conceptual map, not a construction document. And Mr. Jane's last comment was, I think he meant this to be one of the trivial photographs. He mentioned that photographs prepared for the purpose of photo simulation are often taken at using a 50-millimeter lens or a normal lens. And he answered his own question. He was absolutely right in speculating that I chose to use a 24-millimeter wide-angle lens simply to capture the full spread of the agricultural buildings. If I'd used the 50-millimeter lens, I would not have captured the full building in the frame of the photograph, and it would not have given a wide enough perspective for the board to understand the full character of the visual screening. So in cases where your subject is closer to you, it's often using a more wide-angle lens is accepted industry standard. So I think Mr. James just had a question, but he speculated correctly when he took a guess at what my thoughts were on that. He was correct. And I'd just like to point out that in Mr. Jane's letter, he said that he just pointed out to the board that the applicant is proposing small additions to the rooftops of existing buildings. It's unlikely that such small additions would have a significant visual impact, as it does not increase the built area and increases the building height by no more than 8 inches. So that we certainly believe that that's true, that this is a very minor visual impact. In fact, it really doesn't cross the threshold into visual impact. It's simply a change in the visual character of what's already there. Thank you.
The first thing I'll do is ask for questions from members of the planning board.
I have a couple of questions. You referred to a hedgerow, but if that's kind of non-specific, what sort of species are involved in that hedgerow?
The species that we were able to identify are in the report. And Michael, you're familiar with that. The species that are in the hedgerow, there's honeysuckle.
There's honeysuckle, privet, some dogwood.
There's honeysuckle privet, some dogwood, multiflora rose. There are small saplings of hardwoods that have grown into the hedge and become part of the structure of it. There's a lot of grape, wild grape that's going through it, poison ivy. It's a pretty varietal mix of stuff. The question that before, while I'm up here, at the far end of the property, down by the McLaughlin line, there's a field that we cleared, and the hedge had extended about 50 feet out. The hedge material had extended about 50 feet out into that field, and I cut it in rows so that we would have material that is the width of the current hedge that gets a chance to grow up with sun on both sides. So it's like a little nursery for the hedge. And we have probably 500 or 600 linear feet of material there that we can move into the areas that are currently bare or thin.
A second question, on the area where you're showing to the south of the southern panel, where the drive is there, that's the most open and will be most exposed, and even with the hedge, it's still showing all of the solar panels. Is it possible to put a berm plus the hedge on top of the berm in order to screen those panels?
I would have to look at the how the transplanted hedge material in that area would grow on a berm, whether it would get enough water. I don't have an immediate answer to that question. The question that comes to mind is that important to go to that level to screen the roof of the building? And I'll leave that question open to the board. But the intent was not to endeavor to fully screen the panel to make it invisible. It was simply to break up the architectural mass to make it less obvious.
Well, we have to find out what that is, because on the other project we looked at, there was a whole other approach.
We are restrained by the regulations in our zoning law about screening not of the agricultural buildings, but of the solar installation as a commercial operation. I have a couple of questions. A number of the species that were mentioned are now considered invasive species and are no longer and they would be sold in New York State for nurseries. The multiflora rose, of course, is dying in virus, and probably isn't going to live much longer. And of course, the honeysuckle often tends to decline very quickly.
Can you talk to the microphone? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And I guess my concern is in 3 years, we have to reevaluate, continually approve this, instead we have to reevaluate it, including the screening. Is there some way we can ensure that the plants we're being used are not invasives that at some point, are not desirable for any number of reasons? New York State has said that. And at the same time, that will survive, that aren't going to be susceptible. Obviously, you don't want to plant green ash, things like that, for anything, particularly along the river. I don't think there's probably green ash allowed down there. And at the same time, using invasive species for a hedgerow, some people might object to that down the road. Some other issues with simply aren't described. Multiflora rose makes a wonderful hedge. I have a beautiful one all through my property, and it's all bedded on. And the problem is we're going to be tasked with having to reevaluate this every few years. And the major thing we're going to reevaluate, obviously, is the screening to make sure it works. And we want to make sure that the applicant is not placed in the position of putting certain screening materials in, which may not do what they wanted to do, and then the pressure goes on them to come up with some quick fix to resolve that, so that we be in a position to reaffirm whatever approvals we might give.
I'll respond to that by reminding the board that this is a unique screening solution in that we're not selecting nursery stock to plant in this area. We're encouraging what's already there to infill and be as strong and vigorous as it's capable of being. So we're taking, I use the term loosely, but the native or the natural material, which some of it is non-native and invasive. We're not proposing to try to remove any of the invasive species. We're simply using what's there to maximize the visual barrier between Mill Road and the structures. So we certainly would not seek out any invasive species or any other type of unacceptable nursery stock to create this. We're simply encouraging what's already there to be as dense and tall as possible. And if there are any species that are in decline in this area, I'm confident that certainly other species will take root and grow in their place, as long as the hedgerow is maintained and pruned to maintain healthy growth.
Other questions? Sharon?
What is the distance from the edge of the pavement to the west side of the drainage ditch? And what is the distance from the edge of the pavement to the new fence posts that you put in last week? Because the total distance doesn't look like it's going to accommodate a farm road and a 10 to 15 foot hedgerow.
The interior limit of the hedgerow is established, and we have 15 feet between that hedgerow and the posts. It's variable how wide that ditch is along Mill Road. There are places where the distance from the edge of the pavement to the hedge is 5 feet, and there's places where it's 15. And that mostly depends on how wide and broad the ditch is. We've kept the same distance from the interior edge of the hedge consistent to the posts the whole way down.
So there's room to...
And what is that distance from the hedge to the post?
At the smallest point, it's 14 feet. It's wider at some points, depending on the trees that we've decided to leave on the inside.
On the inside of the west side of the hedgerow?
Yes. There's a line of trees that are roughly parallel with the fence posts that are along the edge of the field, and some of them are quite mature, and we're trying to leave those in. So we've made our fence avoid certain ones in there. So there's a place where we move the fence in 3 or 4 feet to accommodate a tree.
Into the pasture more?
Less pasture.
Right.
Yeah.
I have another question.
For me or for the landscape architect?
It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of comment, because I know there's a previous application before this board for solar, and the comments have been zero view of the solar. And there is a section on Martin Road where you can see the shade barn, or the hay barn, I'm not sure which at this point. In the winter, when the leaves are off, you can see that barn, and it's about 7/10 of a mile distance from the road. So, that's just a comment I'm making at this point. But you can also see it from Martin Road. The other comment I have is that, we're giving a lot of emphasis to the neighbors, which are severely affected by it on a 24/7 basis. But you also have all the people that live further down the road, that travel this road every day, that are going to see this if it's not screened. You have all the bikers, all the walkers, all the dog walkers, all the, bicycles, walkers, marathons like we had this weekend, that are all running up and down this road and see it. So it also affects other people besides the neighbors.
I've had a lot of comments from people who are disappointed that the hedge will obscure them from being able to see into the fields. So there's both sides to that.
Well, there's a difference between looking at livestock and solar panels.
You'll probably be able to see both.
I just refer the board back again to the town's consultant, Mr. James, who referred to this as a relatively minor visual change. And these his exact words. It's a small addition and unlikely to have significant visual impacts.
I have one more question or comment. The visual report states that you're going to clear the trees between the two barns for a corral. That means that there's going to be more visual view of the second barn, the north barn, than there is now even.
And the photo simulations that I showed you took that into account.
Okay. That's all I have.
Other questions? Okay, the public, questions, comments from the public, you have to please come up, speak in the microphone and identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Susan Ragusa, and forgive me, I have notes all over the place. I'm just trying to collect my thoughts in a way that answers some of the questions that have been asked, and then of course answered, and then also pose some of my own. But I do want to first respond to the question that I think you had about what did I mean by people are often confused. Is that you weren't sure what I meant, right?
Right.
Well, what I meant is exactly what's happening right now. So I am confused. I think that I have sat through this, paid attention, taken notes. I've read through the visual analysis, and I am still really confused about what this all means. And so I'm only speaking on my behalf, but I am sure that there are people on the road that also have no clue as to a lot of this, and so that's what I'm saying. I think that it is a complicated issue, and I think that there's good, and I think that there's not so good, but not enough of that has been made available, and that's why I say that it needs to be made available. Another question. The previous applicant had talked about working with Central Hudson, and the question to them was, what is the backup if there should be some sort of a problem? And that's a good question. So what is the backup if something fails on, the road with Central Hudson? What is the backup plan for the solar panels? Anybody can answer the question.
It's a grid intertie system, so in the event of any grid instability, it's required to shut down.
And what does that mean?
If the grid is off, or if the grid wanders out of frequency or out of voltage, the system shuts down.
And now what does that mean to my house, which is directly across the road and probably is connected to the new...
It means nothing. It just means the solar system shuts down, If Central Hudson's grid is still up and operating, then your house will still be up and operating.
So that's great, and I love it, because that tells me something that I didn't know. And these are the kinds of, and I appreciate it. So these are the reports, and I made a comment on every single one of the answers to the questions, which is, can we have visibility to this survey? Can we have visibility to this report? Can we have some sort of backup? So that what you just shared with me is reassuring, and I appreciate it. We don't have any of that. And I don't know if that's something that we are entitled to. I mean, is it? I mean, is it something that we should be having visibility to?
Having visibility to
Just
what?
the kinds of reports.
That, the question you just brought up, in general, these solar, community solar farms,
Yep.
they don't give you power. Central Hudson
Great.
always gives you power, and they will continue. If that thing falls over, you will continue to get your power from Central Hudson. These guys are creating energy and pumping it into the system where it's managed by
And I
Central
think it's great, but what I'm saying to you is, I'm not questioning that, I'm just saying that as a resident, I would just like to have a comfort zone to know that.
It doesn't, it made electrical,
You
microphone.
can't have
Oh,
discussions.
I would just like to know if as a neighbor, one of the neighbors, if we could have some visibility to the reports. I'm not questioning it.
All the reports.
What?
They're on file.
They're on-
At the board office.
Okay.
Anything that they've given us is on file.
Okay. So what I feel very strongly about is that, just make sure I've got all my notes here, and again, forgive me, please. I have another question. So I live directly across from the East Gate, and I know that there's an area, and I don't know whether it's the hedgerows or however you would call it, but is there an area that is a bit of a wetland? Is there something, because I know I have a wetland on my side, so how does that affect your property? Is there an actual piece that is considered to be a wetland?
So, there's no state or federal wetland that's in that part of the property by the driveway there. We have a culvert that comes underneath our driveway and empties out and meets up with the town's ditch. And so there's a wet area that goes under our driveway and then out across and into the ditch.
Okay.
It's probably 30 feet wide by whatever the distance is from the driveway to the ditch.
Okay, so how would that affect?
Our attorney has informed me that the questions have to be addressed to the board, and then we can then.
Okay, so
And
how?
I think I can also answer that question for you. There was a wet area, and under ag and market law, the farmers are entitled to farm wet areas, wetlands, things of that sort for agricultural production. So there is a small wet area there, as Michael has described it, but what they have done there is basically in service to agriculture and is allowed under state law.
Great, okay. All right, so, so what I am suggesting, or I'm asking the committee, is to provide some sort of a workshop for the people who are impacted by this, so that we really understand the kinds of things that are being discussed tonight. If we have access to the reports, that we can understand those reports, so that we are informed citizens. I stated before, I believe in solar power. I actually like the way the barns look. This is without the panels on them because there is no screening. So I'm open to hear what needs to be heard, which probably speaks to a lot of other people on the road. So that's what I'm asking the committee. I have one question for the gentleman from Saratoga Associates, one for Michael, and I'm done.
Direct your questions to the board.
Oh, that's right, I keep forgetting, you know, I'm new at this, so forgive me.
I forget as well.
Oh, thank you. So, in the report from Saratoga Associates, there's a signature on it, but I don't know who wrote it. Is it possible to just share with us who provided that initial
I
report?
think this gentleman could do that.
I wrote the report myself.
And your name is?
Matthew Allen.
And so you are a visual architect.
I am a landscape architect, registered landscape architect in New York State, and I've been practicing for 25 years in the discipline of visual impact assessment.
Okay, I just didn't know who you are, but now I know, thank you. And also, last but not least, and I think this is just a question that has been gnawing at me, now let me make sure that I say it correctly, because I think it is an important question. Whoops, here we go. So, what is being presented here is clearly altering, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's altering our road, and so that being said, there is an assumption that this solar power will be used exclusively for Goomer Hollow or the Dakotas. And I would like to know, and I'd like it to be said tonight, that there is absolutely no intention whatsoever of using any of the solar power that we generated from these structures and being sold to a third party.
I think I can answer that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is a community solar project. Goomer Hollow will be using a portion of it, of the generated electricity. There will also be other people, I don't know if the proper term is to say having shares in it, something of that sort, that they will then be credited on their electric bill for the power that is generated by their share of the solar array. So this power, when it's generated, goes directly into Central Hudson. It doesn't go to any specific house other than Goomer. Well, actually, Michael, I assume you also, it goes into Central Hudson. You don't get it directly from the panels either, do you?
Are they even required to buy a share of the solar? It's a community solar, so if Michael doesn't want to buy in.
But I think Michael can explain exactly what he has in mind with this.
So what we're applying for here is to be able to share the power that we generate both with the farm and with other people who are interested in getting solar power. And that's why we're having site plan hearing, that's why there's a visual impact portion of this. If we were simply putting panels on the barns for our own use, it would only require a building permit.
Okay.
And we could do that, I'm correct with that?
Yes.
Yeah. And we could do that up to a certain amount that the farm and its residences would be able to use. So that actually is an alternative to this proposal, is that we come back and put panels on the buildings for our own use and don't tie in to be able to provide electricity for people who are interested in clean power. And it's important that you all know that.
Well, this is a building permit. We still review the application.
If it were a building permit, say, let's say this is roof mounted for your house, for example. Under the law, you wouldn't have to go to the planning board. You would have to get a building permit to do that, as long as it's just for your home.
And there's a certain square footage that's allowed on existing buildings.
Now, if it were ground mounted, Richard, then it is a special use permit site plan for residential use.
Yeah,
Right, but also, in addition, if it wasn't a community solar plant, you would only put on a much smaller portion.
Well,
Because you would only
it would be a portion of each building that we would be able to put panels on, and it would be determined by the power that we would need
overall farm.
over the whole farm and the residences on the building. We have all of the farm is tied into a single.
You could never, just for clarification, you could never use the power generated with what it is right now on the whole farm.
Well, no, what we're proposing, because we have the roof space to do it, is to provide more power than just what we need. And there's real benefits to that.
Right, no, but just to back up, you made a statement that says our other option is to just put on panels for our own use.
That's right.
If you were to do that, you might, if you're lucky, you probably only use 20% of what's shown now, because you're not allowed to put up more.
We could do a quick back of the envelope calculation,
Yeah.
but the other, and I don't want this to sound like a threat, but it's a reality of what we're looking at here. There are no screening requirements for that. It's really hard to maintain the hedge that we have there. It takes an enormous amount of our time and effort, and we have worked really hard over 5 or 6 years to establish it out of, not because of these buildings, but because we thought it was a good thing for our neighbors to provide that. If you guys had houses in a farm district where you had normal setbacks, you would be required by the ag law to put the screening in. But none of you have houses that sit far enough back from the road to accommodate that. That's part of the ag law. So we've been doing it because we feel like it's the right thing to do. But it's becoming this token that we're moving back and forth. Everybody really has to understand what the real world implications of where we're going with this are. So it's an important question.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, did I answer my question? Okay, so I'll cede the floor to the next person. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Other questions from the public?
Good evening, Robert Donaldson. I live at 307 Mill Road. Just a couple of things before I begin. Michael, that area by the East Gate entrance, you call it a wet area. I know it's not a designated federal, state, or county wetland, but if you look at the wildlife and the plant life that's in that spot there, it's a wetland.
I'm not denying it's a wetland, but if you look at ag and market law, you will find that
I know
the farmer
that.
is entitled to do exactly what people do.
I know that. And I've read the agricultural and market law and the court cases involved with it. However, if you say that farmers can use this area because they're agriculturally exempt, but what if the activity is not agriculturally exempt? So, Eric, you proposed me putting a berm in there, okay, to increase the height of the hedges that might mitigate the view shed from the road. But you're placing it in a wetland area for a non-agricultural activity.
But we're not doing that.
Okay, but I just want to bring this point up here. Right? So the other thing was, back in July, I requested more information about the solar transformer meters, and I asked the representative from Hudson Solar or Suncom at the time, could they provide more information about it? A picture, more than a 2x2.
Bob, if you could address the board, and also, you have to speak in the microphone.
All right. So I asked for this information, and it's been 3 months since I asked for it. Has that information been presented to the board?
I don't believe I've seen it, but I'm sure that that information exists somewhere and it can be provided.
Okay.
I'm looking for a nodding of the head over there.
For me?
I'm looking. The information Bob is asking for.
Yeah, it's a standard utility distribution transformer, green box, but we'll get you a picture.
Thank you. Okay. Before I begin, I prepared a report about the visual analysis report that was submitted by Saratoga Associates. That's what I want to talk about tonight. However, I didn't have the amended version or information, so all the information that I based my report on is dealing with the August 31st letter. But before I go into it, 2 points I'd like to bring up to the gentleman from Saratoga Associates, okay? And I should pose this as a question, right? The picture of 307 Mill Road is not an accurate picture of 307 Mill Road. It's a picture, whoever took the picture stood on the border of 317 Mill Road and 307 Mill Road, where there is somewhat of a dense hedgerow. Go 5 feet down the driveway onto our property, and it's open. So that picture is a misrepresentation. The other thing that was brought up in a number of conversations tonight was we don't have winter pictures. All right? Oh, yes, you do. Back on the July 16th planning board, I submitted an extensive report showing summer, winter pictures all the way down Mill Road. And those pictures were available, all right? And I don't know why anybody has resorted to using them yet. So please, when you're thinking about this and you go, well, I would like to have a winter leaf off-season pictures, they're there, all right? So, after reading the visual analysis report a number of times, I prepared a full report outlining all the issues, concerns, and questions that myself, along with the neighbors on Mill Road, have, and we asked that the planning board consider these, all right, when reviewing this visual site report. And here's a copy of the report that I prepared that I entered. I'll wait for you to come back. Where did they left?
Well, there's still a quorum here, so I think you can continue. Are you going to just go over the high points, or are you going to?
Yeah, I'm just going to summarize the main portions.
That would be appreciated.
Okay. To summarize some of the more important aspects of this report, first of all, the report relied not only on enhanced photographs, it relied upon enhanced terms like densely vegetated hedgerow or dense stems and branches and visually impenetrable barriers, all right? Terms that are all unfounded and misleading. Then again, the information in the visual analysis report in itself is unfounding and misleading. The report made no reference to Town Zoning Code 125.4/47 solar energy systems, or made any attempt at addressing the mitigation part of this visual analysis report by referring to the town comprehensive plan or policies found in the town's local waterfront revitalization program. The report lacks any supportive documentation or leaf-off season photographic proof. The leaf-off conditions of fall, winter, and early spring seasons will certainly exacerbate the contrasting, discordant viewshed of the proposed roof-mounted solar panels. Yet Saratoga Associates asked this planning board to assume without any proof that the existing and proposed additional shrubs would comply with town codes and regulations. That in itself is baseless and misleading. I asked members of the planning board to refer to the pictures, both summer and winter, that I included in my report at the July 16th planning board meeting. Now, as to the hedgerow, there are varying heights and density levels along with open spaces. The actual condition of the hedgerow, in many parts, hardly meets the visual impenetrable barrier description used in the report. More importantly, it does nothing at mitigating the viewshed of the roof section of the barn and buildings A and B where the solar panels are to be placed. During the leaf-off season, the dense stems and branches of the hedgerow will not provide a substantial visual screen to the views into the property from Mill Road. More so, it will not block the view of the roof-mounted solar panels that are going to be placed on these buildings. The report focuses mostly on the existing hedgerow along with the infill planting of healthy shrubs and very little on any planting of trees, especially coniferous trees. The report states that select mature trees and occasional new saplings will be left to grow as individual trees that will enhance the visual screening. While how this will help mitigate the viewshed of the solar panels was not addressed in this visual analysis report. The report does not identify which trees or their location will be left to grow. If the owner follows through with the planned clearing between buildings A and B, there will be few, if any, trees remaining which would provide some screening during the summer months, but certainly not during the winter months. Town Zoning Code, Section 125-47, letter I, Section 14, specifically states that the introduction of new plantings will consist of naturally appearing blend of deciduous and coniferous species and shall be required to help screen the solar power plant from scenic roadways and neighboring residences. Rhinebeck's comprehensive plan encourages the use of native and non-native, non-invasive species for landscaping and discourages the use of invasive plant species. The report never mentions when any of the mitigation plans will be done. In the July 16th report, I asked that the board consider recommending that any of the infill planting or any mitigation plans that the owner will use before the panels are put in be conducted prior to the installation of the solar panels. All right? Regarding the enhanced simulated photographs, remember that these pictures are computer-generated simulations. Even with the planned simulated conditions, the proposed mitigation will certainly block the view of buildings A and B, but will not block the view of the barn building, all right? Which can be clearly seen from Mill Road, all right? And also will not have any positive effect at mitigating the viewshed during the winter months. Regarding the inventory resource and visual impact information in this report, what is most interesting about the report is that in the aesthetic impact section, it refers to a DEC policy regarding inventory resource. stating that the DEC visual policy defines an inventory resource as, quote, a place recognized for its beauty and designated through federal and state democratic political processes in recognition of its aesthetic value, end quote. And then it goes on to provide 15 examples of aesthetic resources that are found in this resource. The report then makes the following conclusion, quote, no places meeting the DEC visual policy definition as inventory place fall within the viewshed of the proposed PV system. As such, the proposed project will not result in an adverse visual impact under seeker. Well, that conclusion is totally false and extremely misleading. There are two examples of aesthetic resources that were overlooked, right? The first one is, number 9, was that a site, area, lake, reservoir, or highway designated or eligible for designation as scenic, and also an area of scenic area of statewide significance. Now, the barn and the buildings are located adjacent to Mill Road. Mill Road is a New York State and town designated scenic road. The area where the buildings are located is located in a scenic area of statewide significance, a State District 17 Mill Road subunit. Right? All this information is found in the Town Comprehensive Plan and supported by policies in the LWRP policies 24A, B, and C. According to the DEC policy, assessing and mitigating, also, in case there's any question about, well, the inventory resource says scenic highway, but Rhinebeck has a designated scenic road. I spoke with Kent Sanders, who was with the Department of Environmental Conservation, Division of Environmental Permits, and I explained this discrepancy to him, and he said, oh no, if Rhinebeck has designated Mule Road as a scenic road, it will come under the scenic inventory resource. Also, the area being a scenic area of statewide significance would come under this inventory resource. So, according to the DEC policy assessing and mitigating visual impacts, visual impact occurs when the mitigating effects of perspective do not reduce the visibility of the object to insignificant levels. A visual impact may also be considered in the context of contrast. While the proposed mitigation plan will somewhat reduce the visibility of the hay structures from the viewshed along Mill Road, it will hardly do anything at mitigating the contrasting, distorted viewshed of the roof-mounted solar panels. The report concludes that the proposed PV system will not be visible from any inventoried resource, sensitive resources, as defined by the DEC visual policy, and will not result in adverse visual impacts as defined under seeker. Well, that response is erroneous. Since Mill Road is a designated scenic road, and the area of the Goomer Hollow property where these barns and buildings are located is in a scenic area of statewide significance, the viewshed in the road and the adjacent properties must be protected by town regulatory policies and codes. As such, the proposed roof-mounted solar panels, even with the proposed mitigation, would still create an adverse, contrasting visual impact of the viewshed along Mill Road. Since it has been shown that the applicant must comply with the aforementioned zoning codes and regulatory policies, the residents of Mill Road asked the planning board to hold the applicant responsible at properly addressing the visual and aesthetic concerns at providing the requisite and appropriate screening. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything wish to share tonight?
Sorry, I'm Dave Schaff. I live at 325 Mill Road. I just want to say that one of the things I heard tonight was the impact will be minor. And I just want to give you an example of what minor means in the line of work that I have. Because the definition of minor surgery is surgery that's happening to somebody else. So if it's minor impact and I'm the one who's looking at it every single day, then it is an impact. And the existing hedgerow that's there is non-existent in the wintertime. It doesn't really exist. I find it interesting because you can say, yes, I can go on and put solar panels on for my personal use. And by all means, that is true. But it's not going to be to the scale and size that we're talking about for something like this. It really would be very unreasonable to say, I'm not going to plant any coniferous trees, I'm not going to plant anything else, simply because it's going to take too long to grow up and have an impact. Well, this plan has an impact on us immediately. So therefore, it's not unreasonable to ask that some mitigating steps be considered so that the view shed is not as dramatic as it's going to be. And I just want to ask the board to please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else this evening?
I'm at 317 Mill Road, and I just want to back up my neighbors. The photographs were very misleading and underrepresent the real visual impact. And we're looking at all of these highly technical reports. It's very ironic and strange to sit in the room when I look at these things every day, and I can tell you as an eyewitness, they are bare, they are exposed in the winter, it will have a huge visual impact. And if you want to get one more report and one more assessment, why don't you have some real estate agents come over to our houses and find out how this electric power plant is going to affect the value of our homes. Because that might be a more accurate assessment of what's really going to happen. I believe that there were going to be plantings that mediated this a little bit, but I don't see any of that happening. In fact, I see trees being taken down even recently. A couple came down. I'm very concerned about this paddock that's going to happen between the two buildings. It's already very bare, and to lose what little screening we have seems a shame. And I also wanted to comment on the agricultural exemption and the solar electricity. As I understood it, the exemption only covers specifically those panels that are generating power only for the farm, not even for the residents. So if the applicant wanted to comply, it would be a very much smaller amount of panels just to generate fuel for the barns. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else this evening?
Hi guys, I'm Jamie Kagel. I'm Michael's wife. So everybody's talking about their view, and that's important. What I would like to do is once again try and defend our project. Number one, the shade structures are in keeping with best practices, agriculturally speaking. They would be prohibitively expensive just to allow cows to graze in shade that you've built, because if it wasn't generating any income, it wouldn't be financially feasible to allow to build a structure specifically to shade grazing animals. But it has been animals that are allowed to graze in wooded areas do better and are kept cooler, drier, more comfortable, and it's more humane, a more humane way to raise animals. So we're looking at a way to provide best practices in an agricultural setting. Additionally, I don't know if you all read the report, but in 10 or 20 years, the new report from the UN stated that global temperatures are going to raise an irreversible 4 degrees. We feel it's important to do our part and would like some, I guess, consideration to the net good to the planet that doing this community solar project is providing. It's not sort of a selfishly driven project. It's a project that is meant to do good in the world in a general way. And I don't feel that anyone is really taking into account the net good that this project contributes. That's basically what I wanted to say. Also, Michael and I would love to give tours of our farm so you can see how we've been raising our animals, and to talk with us privately if anyone wants either of our phone numbers. I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands coming up, so I can give out my phone number. Call me. I'm around. And Jeff has agreed to answer. I mean, I know Susan had some questions, and Jeff has agreed to meet with people to discuss some of the reports that he had cited, to show, to document their footnotes. Okay?
Thank you.
So these hearings are hard. And I take it personally, and I shouldn't, when people question my motives or and I should probably not take it so personally at this point, having done this for so many years. But I do. And I want to say that one of the things that upsets me is all over the state. Sorry. I get it. There are neighbors too. All over the state, land conservation groups, neighbors, towns are trying to find ways to make farms more profitable. And the reason they're doing that is that they're trying to preserve that open space. Because it's really expensive and hard to do. And one of the things that this proposal does is secure those 40 acres as more profitable farmland for the duration of the life of the panels. And I'd like for you as neighbors to consider that along with the negative impact of having to look at large structures, which you're going to have to do when you're across from the farm. What the panels do is reduce the stocking rates that we have to put on those fields, the number of animals to make it profitable. They provide for healthier and happier animals to live in those fields. And whether or not we get permission to fill the buildings with panels or not, those animals are going to be there, and we're going to be trying to make that land profitable to keep it open. So those are my business concerns. But as neighbors, there's something that you need to think about also. It's not just, well, your community neighbors too. It's for the whole community to consider. Winnicky is constantly trying to figure out ways to keep Bentley's farm going, because if he's not profitable, that land then becomes under increasing development pressure. We're under the same pressure. And we're trying to figure out ways to make our land work as open as possible. And this is one of the ways that we can do that. There is no way to screen panels on the tops of roofs completely. We can't do it. The visual impact showed you that. There's no way for us to do it. We can't plant enough trees to screen all of the buildings, the roofs of the buildings. The benefit of having the panels on the roofs is that they're not taking up ag space, and that you could see open fields. That's a scale you have to weigh one against the other. I mean, these are the real decisions. You're not going to get, as a board, a proposal for this size solar that's on roofs. Again, I guarantee it, it's not gonna happen. And so the proposal you're gonna get for another place in town that follows the law with the screening is to fill open field space with this number of panels. And you have to weigh those two proposals as far as visual impact for the community. The buildings are not going anywhere. And the fact that we can put panels on top of them, I believe, is a win-win. Because they're not out in the fields. One of the things that Ag Markets is really concerned about is all the farmers who are taking their fields and turning them into solar farms. No animals, no crops, no hay. Because it's too hard to farm them. So, we will do our best to screen the visual impacts of the existing buildings. We've made that clear. I didn't write the visual report. I don't have that piece of software. He's the guy. He's done it for other people, he's done other things. There's no like backroom deal about making the photograph. Like he took pictures of the hedge and put them in his program and moved them down. I can tell you that the hedge material that we have to fill in the areas that are sparse right now will be like the thickest parts of the hedge that are there now. And the parts that are open have not been filled because they're open because large trees were there that died and the town is taken out. And we've had to clear all the wood out of those. I mean, you may not have been there long enough to see that, but there was probably 20 giant ash trees in that section that all died. We paid to have them taken down. We worked to pull the wood out of the hedge so that the hedge could grow back. And it will continue to grow back in the areas where we ground out the stumps, and now we can plant new hedge. The hedge will fill in. It will not be perfect in the winter. It will be less than it is in the summer. But in the bare areas, it will be much better than it is now. And I hope that's enough.
Thank you.
I just want to, I didn't finish reading something I had here, but I think I'll just end it on this.
Can I ask, are you at 337?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm 337. And when I said it this morning in this paper, I said that, you know, in addition, I would like to request a workshop for the residents of Mill Road before a special use permit be granted to begin construction on the project. I suggest, and I ask the town board to invite a facilitator familiar with both solar energy and communities in close proximity to PV installations to answer these questions and concerns, the ones that we've shared here, the questions you've answered, the questions that I still have, to resolve any of these concerns and others in order to make recommendations to help resolve any current conflicts in advance of the installation of the project. I think that having all of these questions answered by somebody who is neutral, someone who can facilitate this, could be something that would be very useful and helpful and bring in all the different viewpoints that we heard tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak tonight?
I hate keeping you up, I'm sorry. I know, go home. My name is Mel Donaldson, I live at 307 Mill Road. And Michael, this is a comment to you. You had mentioned something about having a plan to revisit the hedgerow every 3 years or something to that effect.
Yes, it's in the law.
I love that idea because I don't know how successful people are transplanting wild natural plants like grapevines and honeysuckle and everything else. So, and how will they be maintained? So if the board can incorporate that, I thank you.
Well, it's part of the law, actually. We're required every 3 years to review and decide whether or not to reissue the permit to allow the solar farm.
That's the solar.
That's a solar farm, yes.
And one other comment, Jamie, thank you for your for your invitation. But I did reach out to Mike DeCola when he started clearing the land across from our house. And I told them that the fields looked beautiful, they looked really good. The beep, beep, beeping of the, one of your trucks was driving us crazy. But I had asked him, I said, there was a lot of guesses of what he was doing, and I thought I would go right to the source. And I never got a reply from you. So it's like, as far as reaching out, I feel he did not reach out. And I'm a little skeptical about how communication will be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one seems to want to speak, we're clearly going to have to keep the public hearing open. Our next meeting is November 19th. And I think the question has been raised about if we wanted to have a workshop on this particular project. I think clearly the issue here is the visual concerns of people. I think many of the concerns we have with the other application before us don't pertain to this one. It seems to be strictly a matter of visuals. We've had Mr. Allen speak, we've had George James speak through the materials that he has supplied us with. I think that our zoning law is pretty restrictive in terms of the level of discretion we have in terms of screening. And I think that's something that we need to take into account. As a planning board, we can't legislate, we can't interpret, we have to administer the law as it is given to us. And so that's something I think we need to keep in mind. There's a section in the law which I know we've discussed before. It's a required screening for non-residential uses, 12548, which interestingly enough is right after the solar. And it states that shall be that whatever the non-residential use is, it shall be obscured from view in such residential zoning districts and public rights of way in an effective manner as determined by the planning board. So we have responsibility for determining what is an effective screening to obscure a non-residential use. That's the challenge that we face. I don't know what other information members of the board would like to acquire to try and make the determinations we need to make. I know that with the other solar installation, we asked for a landscape plan, which also identifies species that are going to be used. At some point, I'm hoping we're also going to find a maintenance plan from them as well, given that location. That may be something appropriate for now. Our zoning law discourages the use of invasive species. And granted, a lot of the hedgerows we have in the town of Rhinebeck are primarily invasive species at this point in time. So that's another thing that we need to consider. I don't know if we want to just have a workshop amongst ourselves, maybe for a half an hour, 45 minutes to discuss our obligation under this and what we feel obligated to do. Perhaps would it be possible to meet at 6 o'clock rather than 6:30, something like that, to do that at our next meeting? We only have one meeting in November, we have one meeting in December. I don't know, would that be something we could do? Is there sufficient notice to everybody? That sounds fair enough.
Our purpose would be to discuss the law and our requirements.
Right, and exactly what we
And
need
it'd
to
be a
do.
private meeting since we're talking about the law.
It would be a workshop. And I don't think there's any reason people have to listen, but no one else would participate with that.
Okay.
It would be just as we did with the other solar things, just us.
Open to the public, but just
They can listen.
the board discussing the matter.
Right.
So and prior to that, we can throw some questions to you so you can give us the legal.
Yeah, John will definitely be
If you
there.
have questions.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few questions that came up tonight
I agree. I agree.
on our responsibilities.
Well, that's what I want to do now, if I can get a motion from the board that we will convene at 6 p.m. on November 19th in a workshop session to basically go over our responsibilities under the law, under zoning law, in terms of visual screening, visual impact.
So moved.
Have a second? All in favor? Very good. And as far as the public hearing for this particular application, we would wish to continue that. Gretchen, were we going to do that also to the 19th?
Michael, can we make that for the next meeting after that? Because if something comes up
In December?
Yeah, if something comes up in your workshop that we need to address.
Are you talking about the public hearing? into
Yeah, but
December.
if you have the workshop right before the public hearing, that might not give us enough time
That's
to
true.
respond.
Oh, I would love to put it off to December. We already have a number of very large public hearings.
I don't see how we could respond if something came up in the workshop that we needed to address.
We all feel okay?
The question is whether you want to take additional public comment on that. So you can certainly hold the public hearing open in December to give the applicant an opportunity to.
Well, I think we would have to, if we have the workshop on the 19th, we would have to hold it open to December for the applicant to reply.
Yeah, that's all.
But we
He's
don't,
suggesting we have open to the public
On the 19th also.
on the 19th, after our session.
Well, what time have we decided to do that? 7 o'clock? 'Cause we have-
I'd rather not take public comment on the 19th. We can absorb what we had, gives him a chance to go answer. I mean, you're gonna have 10 more people, and I know everybody wants to speak to it, but you're gonna get up and address anything that comes up, and he's gonna be sitting there ill-prepared. And so everyone will be able to take in the workshop information and go back and talk about it amongst yourselves, and then come back to the following meeting.
I think the only thing that would tend to have, if the applicant is willing to put it off to December, I don't see any reason why that would be a problem for us to do it.
Good.
It looks like the applicant wants to do that.
Well, I mean, I don't think, if you're going to have a workshop, I don't think there's any other way to do it. And I don't disagree with the idea of a workshop, I just want to make sure that that then doesn't lead right into a public hearing. It's-
Then we will, if I have a motion then, let us continue this public hearing in December, the 17th, at 7 o'clock.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Very good, thank you.
Can we all, I don't have copies, or maybe I did have copies, of the photographs that have been mentioned that show the leaf log situation. I think it would be helpful for all of us to get copies of those.
Well, those are the sort of things we need to have, they are in the file.
It was on Google Drive.
Well, Bob Donaldson's picture?
Yes,
I
yes.
don't do well with Google Drive.
Electronically?
I think we do have it, I think we now have it electronically, I think that Gretchen scanned it for us.
I'm saying I don't do well with Google Drive. I'd like printouts
Well-
of my files on this.
I know that we have them in file, so. Okay, I think that that is the last item for tonight.
May I make a couple comments before we go?
Absolutely.
One of the things that the people on Mill Road have said is all the people on Mill Road. I live on Mill Road, and I ain't one of them all people. So please, use the word most people, some people, something like that, not all people, because I have never been consulted. That's the first thing. Secondly, I'm confused. I live across the street from those barns as well. I look at them every day. They were there, they're still there, they're probably gonna be there long after I leave Rhinebeck in whatever box I leave in. And what I'm concerned about is, what are people complaining about? The barns, as they are? Or are they complaining about the addition of a 6-inch panel on top of the roofs? Or is there a personal vendetta?
Oh,
No,
please.
personal vendetta.
Oh, Woody, that's, no, it isn't.
I'm just asking a question. I
I
don't
don't
need any
think this is the
response, I'm
forum.
giving you my thoughts.
Is this the forum for it?
Some people go Google.
Excuse me, Woody, nowhere in any of the presentations by the neighbors on Mill Road did we say all the neighbors on Mill Road.
Said about 4
I didn't
times
say
tonight.
all, I did not say all.
At any rate, I think that we're
We
losing
said
enough
neighbors who
time.
are impacted by,
Yes, we're-
neighbors who are impacted
Well, I think
by.
we're getting off topic.
In my report, Woody, I showed the properties that are affected by the
Okay.
view.
Okay, what we're going to do is we'll have a workshop on the 19th. We will then have the public hearing open on the 17th of December. And, you know, your comments are important, we do want to hear them, and we're trying our very best to try and address this. It's not the simplest thing in the world, given the way the law has been written and the requirements that are placed upon the planning board. And some of the things that you are requesting would like to see happen will probably require legislative action by the town board, which obviously is beyond our capacity. So I want to thank you all for coming. The workshop, I think, will be interesting. If you have comments during the interim periods, you know, please send them in to us. Written comment is always welcome. And be aware that everything we receive is in the file downstairs in the planning office, and it's available to the entire public. Could I hear a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. I yell at you.